he has a direct financial interest in the outcome of this case, who is also making monetary payments to prosecution witnesses during the trial. Your Honor, I believe that this is a question of first impression. And because it's a question of, I understand that the facts here in this case are disturbing, but because it's a question of first impression, I would respectfully urge the court to keep in mind the aphorism that bad facts make bad law. A prosecutor, to my knowledge, to Westlaw's knowledge, has never before done this.
What's improper about what he did?
About what Mr. Tinsley did?
Yes.
He made a financial payment to a witness in the middle of a trial that he has a financial interest in the outcome of. He has testified. He was under subpoena. She's still under subpoena. He made a $1,000 payment.
Well, GoFundMe, though.
Reward for her honesty, testifying in a matter that he has testified that he has a direct financial interest.
I mean, he's saying she was honest. Good for him.
For cross-examination.
No, Your Honor, I respect the court's ruling.
I'm not going to strike his testimony. It may be good fodder for cross-examination.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes.
One other issue, given the testimony in the in-camera proceedings, we would ask that he be precluded from offering testimony about focus groups on the verdict for the beach matter, speculation about fixing a jury in Hampton County. These matters don't go to the motive purpose that his testimony is being offered for, and would be prejudicial.
Well,
they don't want him. They don't want any of his smoke at all. None of his smoke.
Lawyers ask questions. Lawyers object. Judges rule. So you've
ducks quack.
A warning.
Frogs jump.
State that you object to that testimony, and if such a question is asked and an objection is made, then I will rule on the objection.
So
they wanted his attorney, or they didn't want Mark Tinsley testifying at all, Michael Bryant. And then today we see that Mark Tinsley's up there, and I think there was maybe one question from the defense, Philip Barber. They didn't even bring up the GoFundMe on cross-examination. So tell me your thoughts on the defense making this motion, it being denied, and then it not even coming up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I do think it stinks. I think it just smells like it just looks wrong to be donating to a witness in a case for which you have some sort of interest. And I just looked at the GoFundMe page. It's up to $26,000 now. And this was set up by the daughter of the witness. So not the witness herself. And I didn't see any other donations at $1,000 except for the starter donation, which now says anonymous, which was Mr. Tinley's. So I think it's interesting. They raised it. Maybe they were hoping,
what a terrible human
winner
being.
Take all here. We'll get him, disqualified. His testimony is out. Great. It's a win. If not,
thanks, Tabitha.
We're not going to make a big
Thank
deal
you, Debbie.
anyway.
And they certainly didn't make a big deal.
What are they trying to say? That he paid her to say what she said?
Even bring it up.
I mean, come on.
Mark Tinsley,
That's a
he
stretch.
was pretty sassy on the stand during the hearing outside the presence of the jury. Let's get to our questions now from the viewers. I'm going to ask you this question, Judge Fanon Rucker. Bill Daly from YouTube. Have the police considered a murder for hire possibility? Do you think
I
they
said it
probably looked
yesterday.
into that?
Well, with what we've heard about what's going on with this case, when we hear about kind of the story aspect of this entire episode, with the Murdaughs being this influential family, and they're being intrigued with regard to stealing clients' funds, and there being any number of potential folks who may have had a reason to try to target the family, I have to guess that the police have reviewed and considered a million different possible outcomes or motives here for why this tragedy happened, and came to the conclusion that the father, Mr. Murdaugh, who is now on trial, was the most probable, most likely, and by evidence, the person who actually committed the crime. But I'm guessing that they did look at that. And
I mean, be blunt. He was involved one way or another, either doing it himself or having somebody do it.
Take a close look at that. I think that's kind of something that's crossed a lot of people's minds. Paige Moody from YouTube, Jennifer Koffendorfer asks, "What do you all make of?" And actually, she said "y'all." I mean, this is somebody I think from the South. What do you make of the testimony about Maggie's PJs?
Got another thought here.
They made a point to mention there were undergarments when she didn't usually wear any with her PJs. Jennifer, they were talking about how Blanca testified, the housekeeper Blanca Simpson, that it was unusual that Maggie Murdaugh's PJs were in the laundry room sitting there. The underwear still had fold lines, and not to get, too personal, but Blanca said she typically didn't wear, underwear when she went to bed at night. So why do you think that it was important to point that out?
Can't deal with that
Well, I
elastic.
think Blanca added a lot of testimony regarding unusual things that were at the house that day, right? The hands not being in the wash basin to be washed, instead being in the refrigerator, the underwear, the pajamas laying out. So I think it just lays out that it was an unusual circumstance that she came upon that she hadn't seen before. And I think that just shows the fact that possibly things were moved, things were staged, things were changed up for whatever reason.
Our next question comes from Sharon Huff from YouTube. Can you explain the legal argument the state made during the hearsay tantrum? This is the words of Sharon Huff, where they said there's a difference between the questions they're allowed to ask their witnesses versus the defense. Michael Bryant, can you talk to us a little bit about that legal argument that the state made?
Yeah, a little bit, because it's confusing. And as I've said many times before, I'm not sure a lot of judges, Fanon Rucker, of course, accepted, understand the hearsay rule that well. And so they're trying to draw a very fine distinction between
You are
what
correct,
the
Steve.
prosecution can ask in eliciting what is truly hearsay. We're talking about exceptions, not the hearsay. Everybody would admit, yeah, it's hearsay. Is there an exception?
Okay, before we jump too far down this hearsay road, follow me on this. Do you guys remember that movie Wonderland? It talked a little bit about, I want to say John Holmes. Anyway, long story short, they had to get this person involved in a murder just to get their hands dirty. You know what I mean? Follow me on this. Think of a Yellowstone situation. You know what I mean? What if he got in deep with the wrong people? They showed up and they said, here's how it's going to go. We can kill you and your whole family, or we're going to take out your wife and your kid, but you're going to be a part of it. That's why there was 2 guns used, right? Maybe they made him hold one. They held the other. They lit him up. They killed him. And then they used the airstrip to fly away. I don't know. I'm just saying. Could have been Colombians. Could have been aliens. We don't know at this point. Could be anything. But yeah, it's a long story with John Holmes. more time than we have right now to talk about.
Where do they take Alec for lunch? Does he have to leave the building?
But who cares where he goes for lunch, man? Give him a bologna sandwich.
I've seen him enter in the morning.
They need to pack him a lunch like they do for anybody in lockup, man. That's what that's what you get. You get a bologna sandwich with 2 bologna sandwiches for lunch if you're lucky in a brown bag.
Jennifer Coffendorfer, what are your feelings on that? I believe that
either way. So if you want to call in with a theory, let me grab that phone number for you again.
Well, it depends on if they can.
I want to hear it. I don't care how outlandish or crazy it is. Actually, the crazier the better, because I think we need that at this point. But if you've got an idea as to what happened and you happen to be watching right now, I'd love to hear that thought. The number that you can reach me at is 262. Let me pull this up for you here. 843-5556. The number again is 262-843-5556. I'm gonna throw that in the comments here, and give me a shout if you've got a thought on a theory. I'd love to hear it.
All righty. Let's
Some thin cold bologna. You already know it.
Janine DeVillers from YouTube. Why was Blanca
The number is listed
telling the court where Maggie told her in the hunting room?
Give it a shout.
Important. Fanon, I thought that, okay, I'm a little confused on this question because I thought that Maggie did, or I thought she did tell Maggie what she said.
Let's hear what they got to say, though.
Worried about the 10 million versus 30 million and them not, her thinking Alec wasn't telling her everything.
So here's where that Michael brought up about the misunderstanding of hearsay rules. And I tend to agree with him. Lawyers and judges have some severe misunderstandings around the mechanics of hearsay. So certain information, I remember as a judge, a statement would be made and somebody said, well, somebody said, and all of a sudden everybody started objecting. Well, wait a second. You're objecting before you hear the substance of the statement itself, which is
man. Couldn't keep his bones hidden. I mean, maybe they knew that something was going to come out. Maybe his wife Maggie was like, "Forget it. I'm going to the state. I'm going to tell the state everything that I know. I don't want to get involved in your BS anymore. Like, I'm not going to be culpable for your nonsense. You've already got me too deep. I don't want anything to do with this. And they were like, well, she's a liability now, so we got to get rid of her. And you're looking at some crazy lawsuits coming in off of this Paul case. Maybe we can find a way to make that work out for us too. So I don't know. Maybe Paul knew too much too, and he was like, I tell you what I'll do to avoid getting any kind of
See, I told you,
any prison time for my involvement in the death of Mallory. Was it Mallory Beach?
Asks, wasn't Maggie staying at one of the other houses the night of the murder?
He was going to go state's witness.
Alec called her,
and then they were like, you know what, can't let that happen either. So
yes, Taylor, that is true. She typically was staying at the Edisto Beach house, but Alex, according to Blanca Simpson, said he wanted her to come to the beach house, and she apparently didn't want to leave, according to Blanca, because she had workers there, is what the testimony was. Kay Fount from Twitter, was there life insurance money collected by Alec? John. If so, where did that go? Kay, I'll just answer that quickly. No, there was no life insurance money.
And both those kids' heads look like a lit
Julian
match.
Has said that many times. Let's see. Jackie Lowe. I'm going to throw this one to you, Michael. I don't know if you know the answer.
In the comments, if you guys have any ideas, let me know.
Jackie Lowe from YouTube asks, do we know if Maggie
might have heard about the stealing?
Family are on Alex's side?
Megan McDonald says.
Yeah, I've not seen or heard anything from that portion of the extended family. So no, I have no idea. You can surmise, I guess, that by silence that they're not supportive, but it's really total speculation. I've not seen anything on that.
All righty. And let's see, let's get to one more question or more questions. There's no life insurance policies on anyone. Then why would Alex kill them? Another motive, Maggie filing for divorce. Could that she take half of everything that Alex needed, everything to liquidate? This is from Jules B. What's your feeling on that, Jennifer Coffendorfer?
Well, that isn't what the state is asserting.
The state's not asserting that, but follow me on this, guys. Remember that he said he was funneling all of these things into Maggie's name.
All of these other crimes was crumbling around him.
Okay.
And that's the motive that they're asserting. So, and it's a motive that I think that they are starting to head down the path of truth or proving. So I believe that was the motive.
There you go. So yeah, what they're getting at right there and what they're saying is that Maggie was getting, Paul was trying to hide his funds, right? He was trying to get as much stuff out of his name into Maggie's name so that he wouldn't lose as much as he was potentially about to lose in this case from the boat incident. And that's what triggered the red flag with the CFO in his firm that was like, wait, I'm not going to get behind this. You can't do that. And then the whistleblowing started happening, so to speak. And then the investigation took place and it started. And that's when people started dying. But Maggie would have been able to walk off with all these things in her name and would have had basically all of his possessions. So
they don't want to be up there ragging on the family that they loved. So I saw it more as regret, not fear.
Okay, very good, very good. Let's do a couple of quick round robin questions. I want to go around the boxes. First of all, Fanon, do you think that there's any chance that Alex Murdaugh takes the stand? And we'll keep it brief because I'm asking everybody this question.
2 words, absolutely not.
All right, Jennifer.
No way they're going to put him on the stand. No way.
Michael?
3 words, not a chance.
All right. I've been going back and forth on it in my mind. And you guys would know better than I would, but I've seen stranger things happen.
I watch Stranger Things
I'm
too.
wondering too, do you guys, and some of our viewers have asked this question. We'll keep this one brief too. Fanon, starting with you, do you think that they'll put Buster Murdaugh up? Because they keep asking Buster to stand up. I mean, his father's sitting there on trial for double murder, and he could be a potential alibi witness. Do you think, Fanon, that they will put Buster up there?
Defense might.
I do think that his testimony will be helpful, actually, to either side. So yes, I do believe that we will see him on the witness stand before this trial is over.
Jennifer?
I concur with that. I think they will put him on, and I think he could be, depending on what he's going to say, valuable for an alibi.
Yeah,
posting.
for
And
the
Michael,
defense,
your
not
thoughts? Do you
he's
think
way
we'll see
too
Buster
friendly
on
with
the
the-
stand
I
since
would
they keep
agree.
asking him to
with
stand
Alex
up?
right now.
I think that's weird, having him stand up. I don't understand that at all. It's objectionable. I don't get it. But I do think he will testify. He's got important timeline information. We know he wasn't around, but there may have been some exchanges between he and his father that helps Dad.
And it was even more weird the other day, I thought, too, where they asked Shelley Smith's family members, the caregiver for Miss Libby, to stand up. I thought that was odd. I was like, the state did that. And I was like, oh, my goodness, what is going on here?
I'd have
All
said
right,
no.
everybody, this has been a
I don't wanna
blast as
stand up. I'm
always,
good.
taking your questions during the lunch hour. Thanks for being with us. Michael, Jennifer, and Judge Rucker are going to all stay with you, but I'm going to be signing off. So everybody, have a great afternoon and stay tuned. We should be back in court after this break. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you are watching Law and Crime.
Good looking out, Anjanette Levy. We appreciate you. And I know she appreciates us too, and that's what matters. So hey, we're back in court. You guys make sure to share the feed if you would, please. Gamma 5. That was my theory yesterday, man. I'm telling you, I'm gonna call this case. I'm gonna call it before prosecution rests. Probably. I'm gonna tell you exactly what happened.
Bring the jury.
So you won't want to sit tight. I'm gonna predict the future. It's gonna be powerful and incredibly precise prediction, almost as if I had insider information. Yeah, foreshadowing. I don't have insider information. I mean, I might, if it helps, if it ups ratings, right? Jury's coming back in. Courtroom's not quite as full as it has been. Maybe that bomb scare the other day threw some people off. I don't know. But it doesn't look as full as it has been. Testimony are in the quorum. I don't understand how all the following testimony are in the quorum. John B., what do you mean? But yeah, I was saying that he was drug trafficking, and then he got in with the wrong people, and then they were like, "All right, well, you screwed up. Now we're coming for your family." And if you don't do whatever the outlined plan of attack, so to speak, is, we're going to kill you and Buster. So we're going to leave two of you alive, but we're going to take two. It's like two of you are going to go. He lost 50% of their product, so he killed 50% of his family.
Next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Probably had a plan go down with $10 million worth of product. Then he put a $5 million life insurance on each one of the family members. Like, all right, $5 million for your wife, $5 million for your kid. Not to pay back what you lost in our boogaboo caribou, whatever you want to call it. It's wild. They still have you put your hand on the Bible. They don't do that in all courts, though. It's interesting. I'm gonna check it out, Gamma. Okay, cool. Well, hey, you guys check it out. It's called the Murdaugh Murder Podcast on YouTube. You guys check that out. There's like 70 some podcasts. Gamma 5 is recommending it. If you want to get some more info, jump in on it. Here we go.
Belinda, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Before we begin, Belinda, are you hard of hearing?
I am.
Okay. So is it important for you that you can read what I'm saying in order to better understand the question?
Correct.
If at any time I say something and I've turned my attention away, just please let us know and I'll re-ask the question, okay?
Okay.
All right, Belinda, tell the jury a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And what was your professional training?
I grew up in Barnville. I went to school right there in Barnville and Hampton, Wade Hampton High School. And I'm a CNA. I worked in the hospital and home health.
All right, CNA is a certified nursing assistant.
I appreciate that, Gamma. I'll definitely check it
Did you
out.
work in nursing before moving into private home health?
I did.
Okay. And
let me turn this up for you guys.
Are
Sorry.
you now employed as a private home care, like health provider?
I'm a private home caregiver.
Okay. And Belinda,
Is that
I'm going to
better,
ask
Dave?
you to put that microphone as close to you as you can. You might have to move it a little bit. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, well, tell us a little bit about what private home care would be.
When you work with one individual or two in a home that's not, like in a hospital or a nursing home, and you take care of that one individual or two at most, and you do their care, whatever it might be. Like when I started at the Murdaughs, Miss Libby was up and about. We just had to watch her, make sure she didn't wander away. She could go to the bathroom. She knew when she had to go, but you had to make sure she cleaned herself and just make sure she eat and stuff. And then with her, it just, her health deteriorated. Her illness got worse. And so she went from that to now she's bedridden, and we have to feed her, turn her, change her, whatever is needed. She doesn't know when she's going to the bathroom or whatever, so we have to monitor her real close.
And I know we skipped ahead, but who do you currently provide home health care to?
Miss Libby Murdaugh.
And how long have you been providing that?
A little over 4 years.
And I think you just said it began as kind of one job, and has it evolved over time into being a more significant job?
That's correct.
Belinda, are you nervous being here today?
I am.
Would you say that you've become fairly close to Miss Libby over these years?
I have. She is, to me, she's family. She's like my family away from home.
So you care about her?
I do.
All right. Well, Ms. Rask, tell me about what your typical hourly shift is.
From 8 p.m. to 8 a.m.
All right. And do you occasionally work weekends?
I work every other weekend.
And what would your hours be on the weekends?
From 7 p. to 8 a.m. in the morning, or 9.
Okay.
9
So
on Saturday
for
and Sunday.
weekdays, it's typically 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how long have you been working there again at Alameda?
Well, I've already been there 4. This year will be my 5th year.
Were you employed during the year 2021, June of 2021?
I was.
All right. Do you remember the day, June 7th of 2021?
June 7th.
June 7th.
That's the that date. Yeah. That was the day I was called and told to come to the house that they wanted to tell me something.
Were you supposed to work that day? Were you scheduled to work that day?
I was.
All right. What happened? Why were you not on duty that day?
Well, one of the other employees wanted to be off, and I switched with her, Miss Shelley. She had some plans with her friend, and she wanted to be off, and she asked me would I trade with her, and I told her yeah, I would do that.
And of all the nurses that work with Miss Libby, is that fairly common? If someone has a conflict, you can call them to try to arrange some sort of change in schedule? All right, so you were off on June 7th, but you would have been working what hours?
If I had been there, I would have been working. At that time, we were working that was on a Saturday, I think, or Sunday. We were working from 3 p. until 3 in the afternoon until 9 the next morning.
Did you know Maggie Murdaugh?
Briefly, I met her. I had seen her several times at the Murdaugh house, but personally know her, no.
Did you get to know Paul Murdaugh?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And how did you get to know him?
Well, he came to see his grandparents, Mr. Randolph and Miss Libby.
Did he come more often than perhaps others?
Yes, he did.
All right, well, tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he was always very polite. He always offered to help do things for Randolph and Miss Libby. He would
that definitely was a game changer for me.
Miss Libby liked ice cream, so he would always say, Miss M, Grandma M, because that's what they called her. Would you like me to get you some ice cream? And she would usually say, yeah, because that was her thing. And he would say, get it for her, and he would tease her about it. But he always give it to her.
So he came around a little more than perhaps any of the other
Of the grandchildren. yes.
grandchildren. Did you get to know Mr. Alex Murdaugh?
I do.
Is he here today? Is he here today?
Yes, he is. Right there.
In the blue jacket?
The blue jacket and blue shirt.
Thank you. On your shift, from the normal shift, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., how often would you say Mr. Alex stopped by in those years that you've been there?
Not very often, not during that time period. 6 or 7 times, maybe.
In the 5 years you've been there, the 6 or 7 times?
Yes, sir.
And you mentioned Mr. Randolph. Who was he again?
He was Miss Libby's husband.
Did you take care of him? Was he a client of yours?
Well, he was not my patient, but I helped him. I assisted him when he needed help.
Was there a point in time when his health became fairly poor and that you decided he needed some help?
Yes, there was.
And if you were there, would you provide that assistance to him, whatever he needed?
I did.
All right. Was there ever a time when Mr. Mr. Randolph, do you know when he passed away?
Yeah, June the 10th.
So it was shortly after the murders of Maggie and Paul?
Correct.
Before he passed, was there ever a time when the defendant came over later at night?
When he was called, not late at night. Well, yes, there was. It was on the 6th, I think it was, the night before Maggie and Paul. I was there that night, and he and Miss Maggie came. They brought donuts.
Okay.
Well,
why would they
okay
bring
then.
donuts?
Because Mr. Randolph had asked for some donuts.
Did you like donuts?
Well, they were Krispy Kreme, and you couldn't get them at the time in our area.
So Mr. Randolph liked Krispy Kreme
Yes,
donuts.
he did.
All right. Was Mr. Randolph, was he awake though when they came there?
No, he was not.
And did he ever actually see Alex and Maggie?
Not to my knowledge. Alex did go to the room and look in at him, but he was asleep, and they chose not to wake him. I told them they could, but they said, no, let him sleep if he can.
And how did he react when he got up and you told him that they visited?
He was, he said, they came tonight, and I said, yes, sir. And he said, that's strange. I said, well, you asked for these donuts, and Miss Maggie brought these donuts to you. And he says, well, is there a raspberry one? And I said, yeah. And I got it for him, and he ate a little bit of it, and then he said, I just can't eat the rest.
So he thought it was strange that they came that time of night?
Yeah, he was surprised.
Was there anything that, I know Mr. Randolph was very sick, but was there anything that was going on with his mental faculties?
No, he knew what was going on right up to the last time I spoke to him, which was the day before he died.
And tell us a little bit in your experience with treating Alzheimer's patients, people with declining dementia. Tell us a little bit about your experiences with them and how they maybe at night, how they rest and what your treating them involves.
Anytime sometimes they're fine with whatever goes on around them. They just ignore it, or they speak out in the beginning and say what they want to say. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it don't. As it progresses, they get more like a baby. You know, if you wake them, sometimes they'll go back to sleep. Sometimes they cry. It takes time to calm them and, just guess, because you really don't know. Like a baby, you don't know what's wrong. They might be hungry. They might want something to drink. They might just want to be turned. Whatever the situation is, you just have to guess and keep trying until you get it right.
And what time did you put Miss Libby in bed?
Generally at 8 o'clock. But now she don't get out of bed. She has a total care. She stays in bed. we give her night medication at 8 o'clock, which helps her to rest along with other medications she has to have.
If Miss Libby does go to sleep, what would you prefer as her provider, healthcare provider?
To let her sleep.
Yeah,
But
Brittany.
if a
That's-
family
yeah.
comes by and they
Caring
say they
caregiver.
want to wake her, I don't object. I let them wake her.
Thank you for its indulgence.
Yes, sir.
My name's Dick Harpootlian. Can you read my lips? Dick
I mean,
Harpootlian?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. And I represent Alex.
It's like, sir, don't talk to me like that.
Now, let me just focus in on, I guess, the reason you're being called here today. You were asked by the state, was it strange for them to show up that Sunday night at late?
It was unusual.
That was the word you used, not strange. And that's the word you used in your statement you gave about 10 days after the murders to Sweat. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Did you know they'd been to a ball game in Columbia before they stopped by? Did Mr. Murdaugh
No,
tell you
sir,
that?
I did not know that.
Okay. And if Mr. Murdaugh, Alec, had stopped by normally during the daytime, you wouldn't have been there, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Alex and Maggie that Sunday night stayed about 30 minutes.
Approximately 30 minutes, yes.
It was late.
It was late. And
How late do you think it was? Like 11 o'clock?
I think it was closer to 9.
Okay, 9.
It hadn't been long, put Miss Libby to bed, and she was starting to doze, and Mr. Randolph was already asleep.
And Miss Libby, let's say 2-3 years ago in 2021, what was her state? She has dementia, is that correct?
She does have dementia, well,
What was it back
Alzheimer's
then?
dementia. It is basically the same thing.
Okay.
It affects the body in the same way. At that time, she could not walk, but we could pick her up and put her in the wheelchair, pivot her and take her and put her in the bed, and she could feed herself. But now she is deteriorated and she can't feed herself. She can't even give herself a drink of water.
Mentally, did she recognize her sons when they came to see her?
Sometimes, sometimes not.
Has that gotten progressively worse?
That is how it works.
Was she aware of the fact that her husband of, I think, 40 years had died, Mr. Randolph?
We told her, we took her to the funeral, but within a couple of weeks, she doesn't, it didn't seem to recognize the fact. For about, I say, a month, she would call for him from time to time, and then now she doesn't.
When Paul, while you were there, when Paul or some other family member would come over, would that calm her down?
Sometimes. Paul had a way of having a calming effect on her. He would always remind her of the past. Like, Grandma, you remember that whipping you give me with that fly swat? Things like that.
And did she watch television a good bit?
She still does, but she doesn't. She used to would play along with the games, but by 21, she wasn't doing that. She was just watching.
Okay. Beg the court's indulgence. No further questions.
Anything further? Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Next witness.
State Call Supervisory Special Agent Matthew Wild.
Raise your right hand. Left hand to the Bible. Do you affirm the testimony about to give before the this trial shall be the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you for your hand. You did a witness stand. Could you again for the record Spell your last name, please.
My name is Matthew, last name Wild, W-I-L-D-E.
All right, good afternoon, Agent Wild.
Good afternoon.
Where are you employed, sir?
I'm a supervisory special agent with the FBI. I'm assigned to FBI headquarters, but I sit in Rock Hill, South Carolina.
All right, and specifically, what are your job duties in Rock Hill, South Carolina?
Right now, I supervise 5 full-time agents and about 17 part-time folks in my unit, the Cellular Analysis Survey Team.
Okay, and explain to the jury what the Cellular Analysis Survey Team is.
So the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, or CAST, is a group of about 80 special agents and task force officers. We're all across the country, and what we specialize in is analyzing historical phone records, specifically the location.
Sorry, the hiss on that guy is.
Right. And is that something that you do
Turn it
personally?
down a little bit.
In your,
If
in
it's
your
too
job?
quiet, let me know,
It
guys.
is.
Okay. And explain just a little more. I know we'll get more when we get into your report, but what do you mean when you analyze cell phone location data? What are you doing when you do that?
So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the call detail records. These records are very much like the old paper phone bill we all got in the mail maybe 10, 15 years ago. They have the date, they have the time that the calls occurred. They tell me who called who. So if I made a phone call or somebody called me, those numbers are listed on there. They have the duration of the call. The major difference between the old paper phone bill we all got in the mail and the records I look at is the records I look at have a cell tower. So they tell me which cell phone tower was used to handle that call. And then they tell me which side of that tower was used to handle the call. So what I do is I take that cell tower information. I can compare it to a list of all the cell phone towers for that carrier, whether it be Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T. And then I can take that date, time, and general location from the cell phone records, and I can compare it to a known date, time, and location. So most of the time when law enforcement is investigating a crime, they generally know what date, time, and location that incident occurred.
Okay. And as part of your cell phone analysis, do you also take location data directly from phones, if available, and plot that as well?
I can do that. Yes, sir. So when law enforcement downloads a phone, it comes in a big report, and there's a location data section on there, and I can analyze and map that data as well.
And how long have you been doing this cell phone analysis?
Part-time since 2012, full-time since about late 2016.
All right. And have you undergone any training to help learn cell phone location analysis?
I have over 400 hours of training. In 2012, I went to a course called Basic Project Pinpoint, where it was 3 days. We learned how to read the records, compare the records to a tower list, and generate a very basic map. I used that technique in every one of my cases from 2012 until 2016. In 2016, I attended Advanced Project Pinpoint, which was a week-long course. And during that course, we took a deeper dive into the different types of records we can get from the carriers and how to use them. At the conclusion of that course, I was selected to go to the CAST certification course. At that time, it was 4 weeks. The first week being training on radio frequency theory, so learning how radio waves travel between the phone and the tower and then back through the network. The second week, we had we had presentations from each of the carriers. So Verizon came into our training. We learned from the network engineers. Those are the people who design and maintain the network. And we also learned from the records custodians. Those are the people who provide the records to us. The third week, we did drive testing. So I have a piece of equipment I can put in my car. I can drive around a specific cell phone tower. I can figure out generally how far that tower reaches. And then the fourth week was a moot court exercise where we had a real case. We had to read the records, generate a map, go out, do a drive test, and then testify to it. And at the conclusion of that, I was certified. Now, every year since then, I've attended the CAST recertification course, which is usually 4 days where we go back and meet with all the carriers. We get technology updates. And then because we're located around the country and sometimes in different parts of the world, we do case presentations to each other, what we're seeing in our respective areas.
Okay. And in your role as a CAST supervisor, And prior, have you ever been qualified as an expert in court before?
Yes.
How many times?
Over 130 times.
So you've done this a time or two before.
Yes, sir.
At this, and when you've been qualified before, specifically, what have you been qualified as?
I've been qualified as an expert in historical call detail record analysis and cellular technology.
All right. And Your Honor, at this time, state would move to, as Mr. Wild, or excuse me, Agent Wild, as a expert in historical cell phone location analysis, if I said that correctly, sir.
No objection, Your Honor.
He's so qualified.
All right. And in your role as a CAS supervisor, you became involved in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you can recall approximately when you became involved and how?
I believe, so I wasn't a supervisor at the time. I was just I was a regular agent, but I was asked in either late, had to be in July of 2021 to provide some assistance in this case.
Okay. And asked by who?
I believe it was Dylan Hightower.
Okay. All right. And specifically, at least in July of 2021, what did he ask your assistance for?
Well, he had obtained a few sets of call detail records on some of the phones in this case. And there was a question as to whether or not where there was a 911 call that was made, and the tower that was using that 911, that was the tower that was used to handle that 911 call. There's a question as to whether or not that tower could provide coverage up to Moselle.
Okay. And so there was a question about why the 911 call first bounced off a tower in Hampton
That's correct.
County, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Moselle, to your knowledge, is in what county?
I think it's in Dorchester County.
Or could it be Colleton County?
I'm sorry, Colleton County. Yes.
And your assistance was asked to help figure out if that was possible. Someone could be at Moselle and a call could bounce off a tower in Hampton.
Yes.
Correct? And the CAS team, does it have tools that can assist in figuring that out?
Yeah, we have something called the Gladiator Autonomous Receiver. And it's basically a box that we can put in our car. It's a computer, and it has a couple of receivers in it. And as we drive around, that box maps out the latitude and longitude, so like where we are with the box, and then it measures all the signals from the cell towers that the box can see in its area. It's very much like the old Verizon "Can You Hear Me Now" commercial. It's just doing that hundreds of times a minute. It's just constantly doing that as we drive around.
And just to simplify that a little bit, it would be fair to say that this tool can do is help you map specifically where cell coverage exists and where it doesn't.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And as you move forward, did you go ahead and conduct that test?
I did. Myself, as well as Dylan Hightower and another agent with the FBI, we grabbed 3 of those pieces of equipment, 3 GARs. We put them in 3 cars. And over 2 days in the beginning of August, we basically drove everywhere all around Moselle, all the way down to Hampton, all the way up to, I believe it's Earhart, and over to 95.
Did you also go on the property of Moselle to take these measurements?
I personally did, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And afterwards, were you asked to prepare a report and to take all these cell records in and prepare a report and provide this report to show locations of various phones involved in this case?
Yes, it was.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 458. Let's have you take a look at it and see if you recognize it.
Yeah, this is the report that I generated for this case.
All right. And when you say generated, what kind of information did you take in to help you generate that report?
Well, so I had to take in the cell phone records, so the records that were received from Verizon. I had to take those in. I had to also take in the Cellbrite downloads that came from one of the phones. And then I also had to, after we did the drive test, create some maps to kind of show and display that data.
Okay. And for this report specifically, there's a couple of numbers that we don't want read, but whose records did you look at? And for Maggie, Paul, and Alex, you can read their numbers. Whose Verizon records did you look at?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the end of your question.
I'm sorry. Whose Verizon records did you look at?
I looked at Alex's, Paul's, Maggie's, and then there's Marty Cook and CB Rowe.
Okay. And did you prepare a report showing locations off of towers where those various phones were on the days and of and surrounding the murder?
Yeah, I showed the general area where the phones were on the days surrounding the murder.
And you mentioned you got some Celebrate data on a phone, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember who you got that location information from?
I got that from Britt Dove at SLED.
Okay. And specifically, whose phone whose location data did he provide you?
That was Paul's location data.
All right. And did you plot those locations provided on your report?
I did.
All right. And those would include times as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. At this time, state would move to enter Exhibit 458 in evidence.
No objection.
So admitted.
All right. And Your Honor, the state would move to enter this under seal because there's some phone numbers included. I do have a redacted copy that we're going to publish for now in the jury in the audience.
No objection.
All right. Agent Wild, I'm going to ask you to step down with the court's permission, and we're going to pull this report up. And this is going to be a little tricky. We got some tight areas to work in, but can you stand in that area there? Give me a moment. Okay. So, Agent Wild, I'm going to hand you this, and I'm going to essentially ask you to start going through this report with the jury to explain to them. I'll probably only interrupt if I feel like something needs to be clarified. You just tell me when you need to click to the next slide. But at this point, I'm going to let you take it away, sir.
All right, so the first slide here, this is just who I am, my case number, and then the telephone numbers involved. So we can go to the next one. The second slide, it just gives a background. So I was asked by SLED to conduct analysis in this case. Is the first paragraph. Methodology is the second paragraph. So again, I take the call detail records. These are kept by the carriers for billing purposes, for some other technical purposes. But I take these call detail records. I compare the cell tower data on those call detail records to a list of towers. And they tell me whether that phone is in Hampton, whether the phone's in Charleston, whether that phone's in Spartanburg or Greenville. It gives me a general idea where the phone is. And then, so the cell site locations, so the towers can change over time. Okay, just in the last couple of years, we've gone from using 3G to using LTE, and now we're all have the 5G bar on our phone, right? So the tower list change, the towers change. And we get updated tower lists on a regular basis from the carriers. So I use the tower list that was in effect around the time of the incident, so around the time of June 2021. The survey analysis section. So again, we took 3 pieces of equipment and we basically drove everywhere, all the way around the area, trying to record all the signals from the different cell towers. What that gives us is a general area of, it actually maps out the area of where there's coverage from those cell towers and cell sectors. And then, my conclusions, you can go on to the next. So this slide just shows different types of cell phone towers. Okay, I draw your attention to the one on the top left. We have these speaker-looking devices hanging on this tower. Those are the antennas that transmit and receive a signal to and from a phone. Okay, a phone is very much like a car radio. As I drove here today, I tune into my favorite radio station or my favorite frequency, and somewhere along my route, there's a radio tower. It emits a signal at that frequency. My car radio can receive that signal. I can listen to my favorite station. The major difference between a car radio and a cell phone is that with a cell phone, that information has to go in 2 directions. It has to be able to be received from the tower, but you also need to be able to send that information back to the tower. So those are the antennas that send and receive those signals. The second thing about this is you'll know that you realize those antennas, they hang on a triangular shaped structure. Most of the towers are designed to cover a full circle or 360 degrees. And the way that the carriers accomplish this is by breaking that circle into 3 sides or 3 sectors. So later on in my report, you're going to see these wedge shapes. And I like to just think of the center of that wedge shape as nothing more than the center of one side of this triangle. Going on in a lot of other places, urban, more suburban areas, there's not really room to build like these big towers like this one on the top left. So they start putting them on the sides of buildings. The smaller ones will be on top of light poles in the cities. So just because you don't see it or you don't realize that it's there, it's still there. Another example of that, of course, is my favorite, the pine tree. These are all over the place, and they usually sit about 150 feet taller than all the other trees around them. But at the top, there's these spray painted antennas, and they provide the same service as a regular tower, such as this. Good. All right, so again, the tower is separated into 3. Most towers are separated into 3 sides or 3 sectors. When I look at the call detail records, they tell me the tower number, say it's 23. They tell me the sector, say it's 1. What I have to do is I have to go into the tower list, and I have to look up tower number 23, and then I have to look up sector 1. And that tower list is going to tell me which way that sector faces. What I'm looking for there is something called the azimuth or the orientation. Azimuth and orientation are just 2 big scary words for direction. Okay, so if the azimuth is 0, all that means is that side of the tower faces north. Okay, if the azimuth is 180, all that means is the tower faces south. So what I have to do is I will draw a line at 0 if it faces north. And then I'll go 60 degrees in one direction, 60 degrees in the other direction. That gives me 1/3 of that tower, 1/3 of that circle, which is the sector in which the energy is being emitted. You can go on to the next one. So I display that information using this wedge shape. So you can see this is a 120-degree wedge. There's just shaded area in the middle. Okay, just because that shaded area is there doesn't mean the phone has to be within that shaded area. Radio frequency is like light. It's like if I shut all the lights off in this room and I shine a flashlight to the back of the room, it's just going to be emitted in that direction. That's all I'm saying by showing the shaded area, that the energy from that tower is being emitted in that direction. Good. And then this is how I map the sectors on the map. I use that wedge. Each one of these green dots on this map happens to be a cell tower. And so generally the phone's going to be somewhere within this wedge, within the arms of this wedge, but somewhere between the tower that's being used and the next one in that direction, but closer to the one that's being used. Yeah. All right, another set of records that we can get, something called RTT, or timing advance. This is a Verizon case. So the records we have are called RTT records. What RTT records are is it's an estimation of the distance between the phone and the tower at the time that that transaction occurred. All right, so what we get is a regular wedge, like we know which tower, we know which side of the tower is being used, and then Verizon tells us approximately how far the phone is from that tower at the time that it's used. Okay, this is based on like a basic time over distance theory. We know how fast the signals travel at the speed of light, and then all we have to do is time them from the time it takes to go from the tower to the phone and back to the tower, and then we can estimate the distance. So the phone, when these types of things occur, we have these records. What we're going to have is this hot dog, or this wedge, this shaded wedge here, or this shaded band here, and that phone's going to be somewhere inside that band or just slightly inward from the van.
And would another, could you use another word for that shaded band? Could you call it an arc? Would that
An
be
arc,
accurate?
yes, sir. All right, so now this slide, this is going into the actual case here. So this is showing the legend. So this is where all the locations in this case are located. Starting with the top left one, the top one, the red pin here in the center of the page, that's the address of the crime scene on Moselle Road in Island. Next is the green pin, which is Alameda. And then next is the orange pin. That's 1104 Luray Highway in Hampton, South Carolina. The purple pin is 123 Russell Road in Brunson, South Carolina.
And I'm going to stop you there, and let's go on to the next slide. And one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, Agent Wild, is you go through some of these, the colors kind of bleed sometimes on these monitors. So the jury may not be able to read some of the place names from where they're at. So each time we go to a different map, if you just kind of provide a general orientation of where, the cities are, and some of the roads are,
Okay.
just so the jury can stay with us, please.
Okay, that works. All right, so this map, I can't read the time frame on the bottom.
Okay. All right, and see, that's cut off on the very bottom there?
Yeah, and,
All right.
but it's okay. We'll figure it out. Can I?
Okay,
Yeah,
well, we can
can
go
I
through
use
the
the-
exhibit.
We're the one I just called. Here we go.
Got it.
And I'll keep up.
Okay,
so you
that's fine.
can see. Okay, so this is,
Thank you so much.
all right, so what's the time frame? on
So
this
the
slide?
time frame for this one is June 7th, 4:53 p.m. to 6:09 p.m. And this is the activity for Paul Murdaugh's phone, ending in 7845. So the blue pin is the address in Okatee, South Carolina.
Okay, and what times do you show Paul's phone in that general area near Okatee, South Carolina?
So between 5:40 and 6:03, generally in that area.
On the afternoon of what day?
On the afternoon of June 7th.
Okay, all right, and there's several hits off several towers, I
Yeah.
think.
There's some down here. There's some at the bottom. So 453, 511. It's using the tower just south of there. And then 521 through 609, the phone is using the tower north of there.
And just so the jury understands, this is that sector you're talking about a few
Yes,
minutes ago, right? So when the tower pinged off this in this sector at this time, in theory, that phone could be anywhere within this sector, correct?
That's correct. That phone could be anywhere within that sector. It could also be slightly outside of that sector because those lines, I can't go out to this tower and look up and see those three lines coming off. It's kind of like a fuzzy area between the sectors.
So the sectors aren't hard and fast every time.
Correct.
But, it's just as in your general experience, within what range will you usually see a phone ping off a particular tower? What's the general max range? I know it can vary.
Well, it can vary because it depends on where the phone is. In a rural area, the phone could be 6 to 8 to 10 miles from the tower, and it can use that tower. It just kind of depends on where it is.
Because towers usually pretty far apart out in rural areas.
In rural areas, they're set up for population density. So in rural areas, not a lot of population, a lot of farmland, they're going to be further apart. Whereas if you get closer into the city or suburban areas, they're going to be closer and closer together.
And as a general rule, do cell phones try to connect to the nearest tower where they have the best signal, correct?
Well, the cell phone tries to connect to the tower and sector it sees as the best signal. That's not always the nearest tower, but most of the time it is.
And so Paul's phone is in the area of Okatee starting 5:30 p.m. to about 6:09 p.m. on the afternoon of June 7th.
That's correct.
All right. And just so it's clear for this jury, we say Paul's phone, you can't testify as to who was holding that phone, correct?
That's correct. I have no idea whose hand that phone was in during each one of these calls. All we know is that was the phone that we believe he was using.
But Paul's phone is in these areas during these times.
It is.
Okay, we'll continue with Paul's phone.
So this next slide is 6:17 p.m. through 7:30 p.m. And basically at 6:17, the phone is way south down here on the bottom of the page.
And let's do some general orientation here. What's this town right here? Can you read that?
Yamasee.
Okay.
Yep.
And this is where?
That's Barnville.
Okay. And that green was again what?
Alameda.
Okay. All right. And red, and this red up here is?
That's the Moselle.
Okay. All right. So what do you see this phone doing during this time frame starting at 6:24 p.m.?
Yeah. So between 6:17 and 6:53, it's traveling north from the bottom of the page up to the side and then kind of to the top. And then finally, where it uses sector 1 here at 7:05 and 7:30, it's consistent with being in the area of Moselle.
Okay. And this is just a pinging in this area at 6:24, correct?
Yeah. These are just the phone calls. These are the phone calls that are coming on the phone. Those are the towers that the phone is selecting as the best tower at that time.
And this general direction seems to be traveling up north, and Okatee would be somewhere down in this area off the map, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's off to the, for the record, off to the right and below where this slide is. And then you see the general progression north towards Moselle.
Yes.
And we see sector 3 here. And what time is it pinging in sector 3, just due south of Moselle?
It's at 6:53 p.m.
Okay. And then we see it switch over to sector 1, which is a north-facing sector, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what time is it in sector 1?
7:05.
Okay.
And then at 7:30, it uses that same sector 1 at a distance of 2.91 miles, which is in
So
the
it's-
area of Moselle.
So it's 7:30, it's somewhere in this arc like we talked about before, correct?
Yes. Yes.
The arc, the number provided by Verizon is not necessarily 100% accurate, right?
It's not because depending on where the phone is, if the phone's out in the middle of the field, 1 mile from the tower, it should register at a mile. But if the phone's in a house, or let's say the phone's in this courtroom, those signals have to go through the exterior walls of the courtroom, hit my phone, then go back out through the exterior walls. And that might slow the signal down, which will make the distance just slightly further.
So it's generally reliable, but not necessarily exactly accurate when you see that RTT distance,
It's
correct?
it's not exactly accurate.
Okay. All right, but regardless, at 6:53, it's pinging to the south of Moselle in sector 3, and at 7:05, it's pinging in the same sector where Moselle is to the north, correct?
Yes.
And so what inference can you draw in your opinion of what the cell phone did between those two times?
Well, between 6:53 and 7:05, I mean, it could have moved from sector 3 to sector 1, or it could have been on the line between sector 3 and sector 1 at that time and just bounced back and forth.
But you would agree that generally this direction is towards where?
Towards Moselle. Okay. Yes.
Okay, and we're on the next slide. And tell us what we see. This is still Paul Murdaugh's phone, correct?
It is. This is 7:30 p.m. to 8:40 p.m.
Okay.
So here on the right side of the page, starting at 7:30, there's those activate RTT hits at.
And that was the same from the last.
That's the same from the last one.
Slide. Okay.
Right. And then 7:33, there's another RTT hit and a call. Another RTT hit on this tower to the bottom left. And then where those arcs overlap, when they're in close timing to each other, that's generally where the phone is going to be. And so you can see that the arcs overlap in the area of Moselle.
So by about that time, 7:30 to 7:33, would your opinion be that cell phones in that area?
It has to be somewhere in the area of Moselle. Yes, sir. And then we have other calls at 8:40, 8:32, and 8:40 on here as well.
Okay. At 8:40, and it pings off of this sector at 8:40?
Yes,
Is that correct? And that's sector which off this tower?
That's sector 1 off of that tower.
And again, same direction as Moselle?
Yes.
Okay, and what do we see on this slide?
This is 9:03 p.m. on June 7th. And so here there's a call, and then there's an RTT distance of 3.11 miles.
Okay, and let's just do some general orientation again. The red is what? This red marker is what?
That's Moselle.
Okay. And the green is what?
It's Alameda.
Okay. And then what's this town right here?
That's Barnville.
Okay. All right. And we have a hit at 90322.
Yep.
All right. And what? And it's off sector what?
It's all sector 3. But again, there could be a little overlap there between sector 3 and sector 1.
Okay.
And so there's a chance, I mean, the phone's likely still in the area of Moselle. It's just using a different sector.
Okay. Your opinion is it's likely in the area of Moselle.
Yes. I know for a fact that there's signal from this sector in the
And then
area. of
you
Moselle.
have a slide to show that.
I should, yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, and then here we have at 10:34 p.m. Another hit.
Yes,
And
sir.
again, this is the same map as last time, correct?
It is. 10:34 p.m. It's using the same. It's the same map. Just the sector has changed back to sector 1.
All right. And in your opinion, that phone is still pinging?
It's consistent with being in the area of Moselle.
Okay, and now we're transitioning something else with Paul, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what is this?
This is the iPhone location data that was taken from his from the download of his iPhone.
Okay, and we have some times here, and can I go ahead one slide? Because
Sure.
it has more information. It shows a overhead map of the area,
Yes,
correct? And let's talk about this. You've been out to this property, correct?
Yes, I have.
And this is where? What is this called?
That's Moselle.
And what am I pointing at right here in the bottom middle part of the screen?
That's the main house there.
Okay. And then this area up here in the basically due north of the residence, what is this area?
That's the dog kennel or the hangar.
All right, there's a big hangar building.
Yes,
And
sir.
there's a smaller series of dog kennels right next to the hangar building.
Yes.
All right, and we have some location data from Paul's phone here, correct?
Yes, we do. So between 7:45 and 7:56, all these circles in and around the road and close to the kennels, that's where the phone is being used. And then at 8 o'clock, there's 2 hits down south of there at 37 and 100 meters.
And we see these red circles. What is that red circle and what does it represent?
So the red circle is the it's the area that the phone could potentially be within. The phone shouldn't be any further than the phone should be where the pin is, but it shouldn't be any further than the exterior of that circle.
So sometimes the GPS information provided by a phone isn't exactly 100% accurate, correct?
Correct.
But it does, the phone information provides information that allows you to determine how accurate the location information is.
It's a level. It's basically a level of accuracy. So if the level of accuracy is like 3-4 meters, I mean the phone's going to be within this general area around me. But if the level of accuracy is, let's say, 5,000 meters, that just tells me it's here in town somewhere.
Okay. All right, and we see some of those distances listed in your data here, correct?
Yes, sir.
So at the 745.31 hit, we see, and what is this number?
That's the latitude and longitude. So that's like the specific point that the phone returned as where it was located.
And then I see a number next to that. What is that?
That's the radius, so the red circle in meters.
And talking about this again, data point, what does that number say?
48.
48.
Yeah, the 48 meters.
Okay, so from the information side, excuse me. So from, if I understand what you're telling us, is at 7:45:31 p.m., the phone is at this lat within about 48 meters of this lat.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's, and then, we see some different uncertainty area. So at 7:46:09 p.m., there's about 165 meter circle. So that's a much bigger circle.
Yes, sir, it is. Yep.
All right, and then we see 52 meters at 7:56:06 p.m. Correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then you talk about these hits, and down here at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
And we're going to advance one more slide to show the digital map. The previous slide had the exact same data, correct?
Yes.
All right. So we're still looking at a overhead map, aerial view of Moselle, correct?
Yes. This is 8:04 to 8:05 p.m.
Okay. And so now we're seeing some hits across this Moselle Road, correct?
That's correct.
And again, we see the location error value, and it's somewhere within these circles
It is.
at those times.
Yes.
correct? Okay. Now we're at 8:06:20 p.m. Correct?
Yes, sir.
And at 8:06:20, where do we see the phone?
So at 8:06:20, it's here on near Moselle Road, just north of the driveway.
Okay.
And from there, it moves towards the dog kennel or the hangar. It moves towards the dog kennel or the hangar, then kind of up the driveway, and then finally winding up back at the house at about 8:14.
So we see a series of location hits, correct?
Yes, sir.
And of course, looking at the timing, it would appear that the phone moves back through the kennels, correct?
Yes.
And then moves up this road towards the house at the main residence, correct?
Yes.
And we see some circles associated with this data, but several of these circles start to get pretty small, correct?
Yes, they are pretty small.
And what are those sizes?
Yeah, over Alaska.
20 meters are the final ones that are in and around the house.
And just so I clarify, we see the blue pin, right?
Yes.
And that represents the actual lat long that was recorded by the phone.
Yes, it does.
And the air, the 20 meters means it's almost certainly within that.
Okay, not that this isn't incredibly interesting and riveting for all of us to hear, I'm sure. I am going to take a quick break from this very comprehensive blue dot red line latitude longitude analysis of this paperwork until we get to a point that's being made with some news that just came through. Kind of a breaking alert from the from Alaska, which is pretty wild to hear that there was another item shot down over the Alaskan airspace just recently within the last hour by U.S. fighter jets. I'm going to play you the quick press release that we have from that I pulled up while we were listening to the points of nauseam. And here we go. And this is from the U.S. From the White House. This is the address they just made. So let me give this to you guys real quick.
That there is another Chinese balloon above Alaska or any other parts of U.S. territory that the U.S. shot down?
So I can confirm that the Department of Defense was tracking a high altitude object over Alaska airspace in the last 24 hours. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. Out of an abundance of caution and at the recommendation of the Pentagon, President Biden ordered the military to down the object, and they did, and it came inside our territorial waters. Those waters right now are frozen, but inside territorial airspace and over territorial waters. Fighter aircraft assigned to U.S. Northern Command took down the object within the last hour. Okay.
That was just released from the Pentagon, from the White House and the Pentagon release that they did, however you want to word it. Like I said, within the last hour, reports came that people nearby the location that live near the Special Command's military base for the United States, kind of like the World Central Command and World Operations. In other words, it's one of the World War headquarters. From the sounds of the planes going to the military base, the fighter jets were making what they said sounded like cyclones, and they're too fast to catch by phones. So we weren't able to get any video of that. They're M35s that are flying over. They're just kind of landing and taking off. Sounds like maneuvers. They could be drills. It could be coincidence. Whatever it might be, though, the location and proximity to the facility or the base that they were traveling at isn't good. The item the object shot down was the size of a car. First, they thought it was the size of a bus. As it got closer to the Alaskan airspace, then they realized it was more the size of a car. So it's the size of a vehicle. It's several thousand pounds, depending. And according to the the press release we just heard, they have shot it down now over Alaska. Apparently, the debris field is much less than it was with the Chinese spy balloon. However, the coincidence of this happening so closely to each other is spooky. It's spooky. Not something that makes me happy, and is definitely something I'll keep my eye on for the duration. But I figured it'd be important for you to hear that. And they've wrapped up. That was just a really short brief that they gave, just addressing the press. Interesting all the same. They said they identified it as a threat to civilian airspace, and they shot it down. So curious what made this the Chinese spy balloon make its way all the way across country without being shot down. This one, however, they haven't made any designation as to where it's from or where it was going, what its intention, but I will definitely keep you posted as things move forward with the day and into this weekend. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and return us back to the this very riveting and very detailed forensic lineup of what the tracking devices are during this Alex Murdaugh murder trial. And we'll see where things go, but we're getting towards the end of the week, and I want to make sure we keep this running solid. So bear with me as we jump back into Alex Murdaugh, day 13, part 2 of this ongoing saga that is the Murdaugh family dynasty murders. So let's hit it.
All right, now we're going to move on to Maggie's phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're going to rewind back earlier today, and let's look at this map first of all. What is this map generally of?
This is like the West Ashley area, so just south of Charleston.
Okay. And we see some tower hits in this starting at
about 4:25 p.m. and then ending at about 7:05 p.m. The phone's generally in this West Ashley area.
So Maggie's phone remains in that general area until about 7:05 p.m.
Yes, sir.
All right, and here, okay, this is a bigger map, so let's get oriented. What is this area right here?
Yeah, so that's North Charleston that you're circling there.
In Charleston.
And
down
Charleston
here.
just to the south of that.
Okay. Yep. And then out here, what is that red marker again?
The red marker is Moselle, the green marker is Alameda.
All right. And then we see a series of hits with Maggie's phone. You've labeled them, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yes, sir.
And these start at what time?
They start at 7:07 and end at 7:50.
Okay. And so, generally speaking, what does this indicate Maggie's phone is doing to you?
It's traveling from the Charleston area west towards Moselle or Alameda.
Okay. All right. And here we have a hit at 7:50 p.m., 7:20 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And where is this?
That's right in Walterboro, actually, right here.
Okay. Right here in Walterboro.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And did you take a look at what appeared to be Maggie's general route from Charleston out towards Moselle during that time?
Yes.
And what road would she most likely have been on to travel?
Joey, I am terrified.
Route 17.
And so that route would have taken her right through the center of Walterboro?
It would have, yes.
I think right out here, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so she's somewhere in this sector at 7:50 p.m., probably right in the middle of Walterboro, correct?
Yes.
All right. And just in your analysis, did you just looking for a rough number here? Did you calculate a rough drive time from here at the center of Walterboro out to Moselle?
Yeah, it was under 30 minutes.
Okay. Roughly 30 minutes.
Roughly
give or
30
take?
minutes.
Okay. And this ping is at 7:20
Yes.
p.m., correct? All right. Now, were there any other? Did you get any more tower information off of Maggie's phone for the rest of the evening?
No, that 7:50 p.m. was the last tower hit I received that was on the records for Maggie's phone.
Okay. And there were some phone calls to Maggie after 7:50 p.m., correct?
Yes.
But were any of those answered?
No.
Okay. And so you don't have any good tower information for her phone after 7:50 p.m.?
That's correct.
All right. Now we moved on, and we're looking at whose phone?
We're looking at Alex's phone.
Okay. And what time frame are we talking about here?
This is 4:10 p.m. to 6:25 p.m.
Okay. let's get oriented here. This is the red marker is what?
Moselle,
The green marker is what?
Alameda.
Okay, and then the town of, what's this town right here?
Hampton,
Okay,
and Barnville is just south of there.
okay. And we see some hits off these two towers between 4:10 and 6:25 p.m., correct?
Yes.
All right. And are you familiar with the location of the law firm formerly known as PMPED?
Yes,
All right. And is that in the vicinity of Hampton?
it is.
And would that be within these areas that Alex's phone?
Yeah, that would be consistent with the activity on the phone records.
Okay. And that's up until when?
6:25 p.m.
All right. And here we are, the next slide. And again, orientation, green is what?
Alameda,
Red is what?
Moselle.
Okay. And what information do we see here?
Here we have a number of calls between 6:40 and 9:10 p.m. and they're all using tower 159263.
And that's
That's the
tower?
one shown, which faces north and is consistent with being in the area of the Moselle property.
So starting at 6:40 p.m., you see him north in this sector, which is the sector where Moselle is.
Yes, sir.
All right. So here we are. Let me go back. And these rest of these phone calls ping in the same sector up until 9:10, 47.
Yes.
All right. And now, what time frame are we talking about with this slide?
Now we're looking at 9:12 to 9:18.
Okay. And in the 912 phone record, where does Alex's cell phone ping? Which sector?
Uses sector 3 on tower 159263, which is the one closest to Moselle.
All right, so somewhere south or close to the border of this tower, correct?
Yes.
And then at 9:18 p.m., we see a ping off of this tower, correct?
Yes, off of 159217, which is closer to Barnville.
And it would be in the north, most likely in the north side of that.
Yes.
Tower, correct? Okay. All right. And now this is the same.
This one at the bottom, 159217, that's in pink.
Okay. And so what your dry test found is, you kind of described those neat sectors at the beginning, but in reality, they're kind of more messy, correct?
There are a lot more messy.
And from what you found from actual field testing is you could get coverage off this tower in, looks like it's just south of Varnville, anywhere in this pink area.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And that's in that particular sector. What sector is that again?
That's sector 1.
All right. And then this green area, you could be anywhere in this green area and potentially be getting coverage from this tower up north towards Moselle.
Yes.
Now, there's some overlap, though.
There
in
is.
those, correct? So there's some areas where a phone could potentially connect to either tower, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And
But in 2 minutes, the calls are 6 minutes apart.
Right.
So, within 6 minutes, the phone used both of these sectors at the same time.
okay. And just as a final point, again, the sectors aren't exactly black and white, neatly drawn, correct?
Correct.
And so in reality, like this little green corner above this tower, a phone could be in that area and still be pinging off this sector
Yes.
of the tower.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And this coverage is something that you told the jury about the drive test, correct?
Yes.
And that's when you guys went out with actual equipment to measure the coverage in all these areas, correct?
Yes, sir. We drove all of these roads. And again, that equipment, every few seconds, it's recording the GPS point, and then it's measuring the signal level from all of the towers and sectors in that area. And then what I do is I go in and I can read the tower and sector that was used by looking at the call detail records, and I can go in and select the coverage area or this blob for that tower and sector.
So let's go on to the next slide. And we see now, we have some information starting at what, 9:20:34, correct?
Yes, sir. So at 9:20, from 9:20 to 9:46, there's a handful of calls, all using tower 159-217, but using sector 2 that kind of faces towards the Alameda address.
Okay.
And then there's also one RTT hit at 9:34 at about 2.09 miles, which is consistent with being in the area of the Alameda residence.
Okay. And that starts that phone's within the sector, it's starting at what time?
9:20.
Okay. And last phone call on that sector is at what time?
9:46.
And Alameda is in that sector, correct?
It is.
But if a car were driving up this road towards Warrenville, and I believe that's Highway 378 or 278,
Yes.
excuse me, that's still in that same sector.
It
correct?
is.
So if someone's in a vehicle on that 278 right there in that sector, you would get the same information.
Yes.
So, so at 9:46, if a car has already left Alameda and we're on 278, it was still ping in that same.
It should, yeah.
All right, we'll go on to the next slide. And this is still Alex's phone, correct?
It is. It's just a zoomed in version of the last slide.
Okay, so it's the same information, but looking closer, and I probably should have made some of those points on this one, but we see that road 278 here, correct?
Yes, sir.
Within that sector, and there's Alameda, it's also in the same sector, correct?
It is.
And so, in theory, for the RTT hit at 9:34, the phone could be anywhere in this arc.
It
correct?
could be anywhere in that arc.
And for the rest of these hits, it could be anywhere within this whole sector.
It could be anywhere between this tower and sector and the next one in that direction.
Okay. Okay. All right, we'll go back. This is the next slide, and this is again Alex Murdaugh's phone, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, and we see some hits starting at 9:52:59 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir. So 9:52:59, the phone's using the sector with the 240 in it. So it's not using the one that faces towards Alameda yet. I'm sorry, towards Moselle yet.
Yeah, and the red, and what's the red?
It's Moselle.
And the green?
Is Alameda.
Okay, so just in the previous slide, we saw a phone down here in the area of Alameda, correct?
Yeah, it was using that tower near Alameda, but facing Alameda.
And by 9:59 p.m., Alex's phone is pinging off this tower right by Varnville, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Which
No,
tower?
at 9:52 and 9:53, the phone is using the tower closer to Moselle, but on the sector facing towards Varnville.
Okay. All right. And then we have a 10:06 hit, 31, correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall what particular phone call was placed from Alex's phone at 10:06 and 31?
That was the 911 call.
All right. And it hits off of which tower?
It hits off of the tower closer to Varnville.
Okay. But then at 10:17, there's another hit with Alex's phone. And which sector is it pinging off?
That's
10:17.
That's using the zero azimuth, so sector 1 that faces towards Moselle.
So that initial 911 call hit off this tower way down here by Varnville.
It did.
All right. And that was one of the reasons you were called in to help figure out why that happened, correct?
I was, and I figured out why it happened. It's because, so in radio frequency, the higher the frequency, the shorter the distance that it can travel. The lower the frequency, the longer it can travel. So on this tower, there's two different sets of sectors, and one is at a higher frequency, and one is at a lower frequency. So this call here happened on a lower frequency, and therefore the signal can travel slightly further.
So it's, in your opinion, it's consistent the phone could have been up here at Moselle at the time of that 10:06 911 call.
It could have been, yes.
Yeah, next slide. All right, and we're going to come up on them in a little bit. Do you have some more detailed maps showing the actual coverage? Actually,
Yeah, I think this
this is
is
it.
Yes, sir.
All right. So what information do we see on this slide?
So this is the tower and sector being used at 9:52 and 9:53. And again, this blob shape here, that's the coverage area for that tower. And so you can see it's mostly in the center here, but there are some dots out. Most of it kind of faces towards Varnville.
Okay. And the calls at 9:52, 9:53, occurred somewhere within this sector. Correct?
Yes, it did.
And that line with the slightly shaded area represents the actual real coverage that you went out and measured where that phone could have been during it.
That's correct.
Next slide. All right, and we zoomed in here, correct?
Yeah, so we zoomed in again. Now we're zoomed in kind of on the Moselle property and just showing that there's a couple little specks of coverage there from this tower and sector.
And again,
on that property.
Which tower is this? This is the tower that's closest to Moselle.
It is, yes.
But you do actually see some actual coverage area right there. On
Yes.
the corner. And the red is right there, correct?
Yes, the red is Moselle.
Next slide. Okay, and here we are, we're zoomed back out. Again, red is Moselle, and this is that tower just down south of Varnville, correct?
It is. So that's the tower south of Varnville, or near Varnville, facing north. And this is for the 911 call, again, on that lower frequency. So the signal goes a lot further. Actually, there's little specks all the way up here near Anson.
Okay. So this is Varnville, this is Moselle, and this is the coverage that you actually went up, and measured in with real equipment.
Yes, sir.
And you've determined all these shaded pink areas, if a phone could get coverage in this tower sector in those pink areas.
Yes.
And we see some of that pink area up right by Moselle. correct?
We did, yes.
Next slide. All right, and this is a 1017 beam, correct?
Yes.
All right, and it's in that sector. Now we're back to the tower that's closest to Moselle, correct?
It is.
And that's that north-facing sector.
Yes, it is.
Next slide. Next slide. All right, and here we see, again, that 911 call at 10:06:31 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
That originally pinged off of this Varnville tower, correct?
Yes.
But we see, this is the two coverages overlaid between these two towers that both have coverage at Moselle, correct?
Yes, it is.
And you see some of that pink from that Varnville tower up right on the Moselle property, correct?
Yes.
But you see more from the green from this tower sector that covers that same tower.
That's correct.
So, go ahead. Next slide. And here we're zoomed in, correct?
Yeah, we're zoomed in now, and now we have both of the coverages showing. So we're showing the pink, which is from that tower down by Varnville facing north, and then the green, which is from the tower right here close to Moselle, also facing north. And you can see there's coverage from both of those towers actually in the area of the kennels.
Okay. And in your opinion, that phone could have been right in that area for both these phone calls at 10:06 and 10:17 p.m.
Yes.
And that's Alex's phone, correct?
Yes.
And it does appear there's more coverage from the green sector off of this closer tower, though, correct?
There is.
Excellent. Okay, and this is just a remainder of the night for Alex's phone, correct?
It is, again, 10:19 to 11:18 p.m. And the phone mostly uses that tower closest to Moselle. There is another hit at 10:21 on the tower near Varnville.
Next slide. All right, and then continuing, what's the date on?
So
This is the next day at 6/8,
Yes.
correct?
So this is June 8th, starting at 6:31 a.m., ending at 8:54 a.m. And the phone's using the tower and sector consistent with being in the area of Alameda.
Okay, so this is the morning after the murders, correct?
It is.
Next slide. And this is continuing the same, this is the next day, June 9th of 2020.
It is. And same tower, same sector. Time period is 7:52 a.m. to 8:36 a.m.
Next slide. All right, and here we see some information from June 10th of 2021, correct?
Yes, sir. From 3:32 a.m. to 8:49 a.m. Basically using the same tower and sector here, just to the left of Alameda, except for this one RTT hit at 3:32 in the morning, where that band overlays on top of the Alameda address.
Next slide. And now we're on June 11th for Alex's phone, correct?
Yes, again in the morning, 3:52 a.m. to 8:15 a.m. And it's using the tower and sector consistent with being in the area of Alameda.
Next slide. And this is June 12th of 2021.
Yep, 1:41 a.m. to 8:14 a.m. Again, using the same tower and sector near Alameda.
Next slide, please. June 13th of 2021 for Alex's phone, correct?
Yep. First call in the morning is at 9:09 a.m. And again, using the same tower and sector consistent with Alameda.
Okay. Next slide. Now we're on June 14th, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what are the times do we see these pings?
12:04 a.m. and then 9:53 and 9:55 a.m. Again, using that same tower and sector consistent with Alameda.
Did you see any phone calls from Alex's phone between 12 a.m. and 9:53 that you're able to get tower information?
No.
On that day?
No, sir.
Next slide. This is June 14th, later in the day, correct?
It is 10:27 to 12:29 p.m. 10:27 a.m. to 12:29 p.m. And now it's using the tower facing north out of Bourneville, but also using the tower facing into Hampton.
Okay. Next slide. All right, and this is June 14th continued. And does that phone remain in the area of Alameda the rest of June 14th, at least until 4:26 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay. Next slide. All right, and then here we're on June 14th. And starting at 4:33 p.m. up to 6:08 p.m., where do we see Alex's phone move generally?
It moves generally from there just south of Alameda over towards Charleston.
And that's this area up here. And it's specifically, I don't know if you can read it, but what is that there? Can you read that place name where that last tower is on the map?
Is it Somerville?
Does that say Somerville?
I think so.
Okay. All right, next slide. Okay, June 14th continued.
Yes.
And this is up in the area of the same Somerville, correct?
Yeah, this is in the area of Somerville, so between 6:08 p.m. on the 14th and 8:10 a.m. on the 15th, all the calls hit that tower and sector in Somerville.
Okay, next slide. All right, and then on June, later that, June 15th, what do we see the phone do on June 15th?
It travels from Somerville back to Hampton between 8:10 a.m. and 11:40 a.m.
Okay, next slide. All right, and then now we're on June 15th for Alex's phone. And what two towers is his phone pinging off of for most of the day?
Again, the one in Varnville facing north and the one in Hampton facing towards Varnville.
Okay, next slide. And then June 15th, and this phone is consistent with the remaining area of Alameda during those times, correct?
Yes.
And those are 12:35 p.m. to 2:33 p.m., correct?
Yes.
Next slide. Okay, and just real quickly for these last three slides, you also reviewed the records of C.B. Rowe and Marty Cook, correct?
Yes.
And you reviewed them for the night of the murders, correct?
I did.
And in your opinion, from the information you could see from their call records and their tower information, were either of those phones in the vicinity of the murder location between 8:50 p.m. and 9 p.m.?
No.
All right. No further to say.
So I'll stand for a moment.
Testimony like this can be a little dry, and as an attorney, you may be losing the attention of the jury. I don't personally think that's the case here because we are so fixed on where these three individuals were at the time of the crime. What's your take, Philip?
I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
You know, Imran, to be fair to this jury, we are true crime nerds, if you will, and we listen to triangulation data quite frequently in the coverage by Law and Crime. But to a virgin jury who's never heard this stuff before, it's numbing. It's going to put them to sleep. I think they need to streamline it a little bit more. But I will tell you that typically this type of triangulation, data point, GPS cell phone data is quite fatal in a criminal case. I think with this evidence and the video where there was the voice recognition, this is going to seal his fate because when you kind of collate all this data, put it together for a jury in a nice little package. It'll hopefully come together for them during closing argument. And my advice to Alec is to just get comfortable, because I think he's going to go down on this.
Philip, always telling it how it is and not holding any punches. So Matt, I want to get your take on this. So I actually think that this is somewhat interesting, just because the locations of these individuals is so important in this case. And I agree with Philip that the witness after witness after witness confirming that is Alex Murdaugh's voice on that recording is going to be all so important at the end of the day. But Matt, I want to get your take on this particular cell phone triangulation data. Do you think it's allowing the prosecution to tie this circumstantial case together in any better of a way than what they have been doing thus far?
No, I think it's important, Imran. There's no question that in a circumstantial evidence case, you got to produce all these little bits of evidence that you're going to put together as a puzzle, so to speak, and each piece is important. There's no question that listening to this cell phone testimony, can cause your eyes to glaze over, even if you're someone who's really enthusiastically following this trial, let alone jurors who've been listening to 15 days of testimony in this case. So it becomes difficult to keep them focused, the jurors, to keep their attention. And I think it's the responsibility of the prosecutor in some way to sort of get to the point and make sure that the jury understands what they're trying to convey in terms of this testimony. But in a circumstantial case, it's bit by bit, and every bit of it is important, particularly this piece of evidence to go along with the other puzzle pieces that the prosecution has already thrown out there.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I have two great guests, Philip and Matt, to keep our viewers' attention as we work through this cell phone data testimony. And we're going to take a quick break here at Long Crime. When we come back, more live trial coverage out of South Carolina. Alex Murdaugh, stay tuned.
Well, what a day, huh? These days do get a little long when we're going through so much forensic breakdown of things like, GPS mapping and things of that nature. But let's see what some people have to say in the comments here about theory, if you will. Jessica Barnett says, I think that's where a lot of his money went, along with paying people off depending on how he wanted his cases to go. Vacations, going to games. They love the Gamecocks and had really good seats. I believe floor level, possibly drug trafficking and smuggling. Hence, all of his properties and probably some in offshore accounts. I don't believe it went to drugs. No way. Gambling. Okay. I can see that. Yeah. Joey Crosby says, I've heard gambling, but he was addicted to something else and would use pain pills to calm him down in public so he didn't act erratic. I mean, if you need to slow down from something that picked you up, I mean, cocaine isn't too far off. You know what I mean? Wouldn't put it past him. It seems like all these people with a lot of money that are in these positions are all doing, you know, some of that sugar booger. But see anyone else in here that's got some thoughts on things. Appreciate all the comments though. You guys are doing great. Keeping up with the flow of things here.
Okay, welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm Imran Ansari, and right now there is a break in the courtroom of the Alex Murdaugh trial in South Carolina. It gives us the opportunity to talk to our boots on the ground covering the trial for us here at Law and Crime. I have Gigi McKelvey, who is outside the courthouse, and she's going to give us the update about what she is observing both in and outside that courthouse. Gigi, what's the latest?
Well, we just have been going through cell phone records where the phones of Maggie, Paul, and Alec pinged off of that night. And so a lot of jurors seem a little confused, not going to lie. But, you know, for right now, I don't see anything super earth shattering about where anybody's phone was, according to what we've heard. That one ping during the 911 call hit off that Varnville tower. But he explained it could. That coverage area was so large, it could have put him in the area of Moselle. So I don't think this testimony right now so far has given us anything that's made us go, wow.
Why would they take her cell phone and toss
it? Before the break with my two great guests, Philip Dubé and Matt Mangino, about this kind of evidence and cell phone data triangulation and how it could sometimes be a little dry for jurors to receive this, and they may be glazing over. What do you see? Do you see the jurors? Are they paying a lot of
could have been retribution,
this, or do they seem a little bored with this potentially dry testimony?
I mean, they're paying very close attention. There's been very few times I've seen the jury not pay attention. They're doing their jobs. It's just you can see kind of the confusion on a few faces in there. It is kind of very technical.
And so you're talking about the
sectors and the times and things like that. So a few jurors are a little confused. I think a lot of people sitting in the seats are confused. But yeah, I mean, I'm written down the times. I just don't see anything that's this aha moment so far.
Yeah,
neither have I, honestly.
This testimony can be a little dry for jurors, but it's so important for the prosecution to put forth this sort of data, this sort of testimony when it is a circumstantial case. Gigi, thank you for that update, and we're going to be checking back with you periodically, of course, during the course of this trial. Thanks for your great reporting down there in South Carolina.
You ever have an animal, don't let them go around.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Your equipment, because my dog is a nightmare.
More of an opportunity to bring in my guest.
What's up,
again, Philip
How you
Dubé
doing?
joining me today, and also Matt Mangino. So, Matt, I want to start with you on this one because you're a former prosecutor, as I was a former prosecutor, and I would present this sort of evidence to the jury. And I would also grapple with, okay, there's going to be a lengthy amount of triangulation testimony and this data. Have you dealt with this personally? And if you did, how would you handle putting forth this sort of evidence before a jury that keeps them engaged?
Well, that's a good question. I'd like to think that when I've had to deal with this, that I've kept the jury engaged. You know, but one of the things that's difficult about this is that, yes, a lot of this
little jits.
Data that we're hearing about is really not, earth shattering.
It's not.
But it has to be covered. It has to be covered because what you don't want is the defense to come back and say, well, how about this? Or how about that? So you have to be very careful that you put as much information out there as you can so that you're not opening yourself up to some, disclosure on cross-examination that makes it look like you were hiding something. So you're going to put everything out there. Some of it's going to be good. Some of it's not going to be so good or even necessarily
not anymore. Depending on what you're getting, Cindy, opioids are not cheap. They're more of a designer drug now than they've ever been.
yourself up on
especially with the
cross-examination.
fentanyl,
Yes, it can be
getting
boring,
pure opioids,
but it's something that you have to do
like
sort of
your Percocet,
to
which is kind of your
protect your case.
go-to,
I
Oxycontin's a
agree.
thing of
And
the
Philip,
past.
let's take a defense perspective from
You
this
know,
now. So in a circumstantial
if you're getting
case
Dilaudid,
where the
you're getting, I mean,
prosecution
there's
is
these things you
connecting
can
the
get,
dots
but
between these bits and
good luck
pieces
on
of
that, you know.
evidence, how
But yeah,
are
they're
you as a defense
expensive.
attorney looking to take that eraser and take away and erase those lines being connected, particularly so with this sort of evidence?
Well, first of all, there's always a margin of error. This is not 100% accurate. I cannot tell
Who
you
does he
how many
look like?
times Agent Wild said that this is not 100% accurate. And you hammer that on cross, you hammer that in your closing. That's number one. Then you get into the distance within which you have this margin of error. The problem is, if that margin of error, that distance is
Look at
not
his
great
son,
enough,
man.
it absolutely undermines and destroys Alex
Like, you'd pick him out of a
Murdaugh's
crowd of a million,
alibi,
you'd definitely
his
call him his
precious
son.
alibi. The other thing you want the jury to understand is that cell tower triangulation data is not based on latitude and longitude. In other words, it doesn't stick you at a very specific
This guy
data
hasn't
point on
blinked
the
once. Oh,
planet. Instead,
there
it
you go.
just puts you in range of where the phone is and where the three main towers triangulate. So then you have to decide from there.
Yeah, we've
how
talked about it.
far
You put this guy in a
did
cloak,
Alex
he's the
live
boatman
or
at the River
how
Styx. You got to
far
give
is
this dude 2
Alex's
pieces of gold
alibi?
before you make your
And
way
from
into the
there you deal
afterlife.
with it. But you want to focus really
When he's
on the
not sitting in
margin
front of that
error,
fake
the
background, he's got a
fact
staff
that
and he wears
they
a
said it's
cloak with
inaccurate,
chains.
and who else could have had that phone in
Michelle,
their
you haven't
hand?
missed anything.
Now that is likely unlikely because most men carry a cell phone like a woman carries her purse. She doesn't keep it out of her sight. You hold on to it. You
Most
don't let
men carry a
anybody
cell
touch it.
phone the way a woman carries a
Yeah, Philip,
purse.
I'm going to throw you another question because you are
To be very
leaving
clear,
us at
man,
the top of the hour. I'm going to first
all
also
people
thank
carry
you
cell
for
phones.
joining us today.
But even as much as the
Philip,
gym
if
last night,
you were, just like you
bro,
said,
just
that there were
nonstop on
certain
her phone.
concessions
So
there by this FBI agent that this wasn't perfect
he's
science, if you
relaxing here.
will, and there are inaccuracies. Now, how are you exploiting that particular aspect on cross-examination that we're sort of gearing up and waiting for?
And we'll be back into court here in just a
First
minute,
thing you
guys. They're
want
just
to
taking a
ask
short
him
break.
is, in his analysis, do you see data points that put him elsewhere? In other words, the heart of this statement that his analysis is not 100% accurate presupposes that there are data points that put him somewhere other than Moselle or the alibi. The question is, where is it? And why does this fluctuate? Why would it vary? And then what the jury has to decide, is this type of evidence scientifically reliable enough to say
I
they
mean,
have
some would
proven
say
guilt
instead of
of a
looking at where he
double
was at,
homicide
look at where he wasn't,
beyond
you know, and go off of the
reasonable doubt,
reverse
or
engineer
does
that.
it raise enough doubt in the location data to say, no, they haven't proven to me that he was there?
You know, absolutely. Philip, thank you for
Mm.
joining us today again. Matt, you're going to be sticking with us on the next hour, and we are covering live the trial of Alex Murdaugh out of South Carolina. We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned here at Law and Crime. We'll be back.
And they always do come back. So appreciate Law and Crime for the effort they're putting in. I got a chance to meet some of these folks with the Jensen trial. Good people. Court TV as well. Got a chance to talk to some of those guys. Good bunch. Man, the I doubt he spent that much, but he could have sold someone else's supply to make quick cash. I mean, if he's willing to do everything he's done, there's no reason why he wouldn't be dabbling in trafficking of some type. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying like he's running bricks of cocaine, you know, but I'm saying it wouldn't be surprising if he was running bricks of cocaine, because he looks like the kind of dude who would be doing bricks of cocaine. That being said, keep an eye out for Cocaine Bear coming out in theaters here very soon. Should be exciting, based on a true story of a bear that ingested copious amounts of cocaine and went on a killing spree. That's real. that's real. Cocaine Bear, which is actually loosely based on the story of Alex Murdaugh. So that's not real. I'm just saying that there is plenty of opportunity for us to look at his motives outside of what the prosecution is looking to paint a picture of, you know. So I don't know if they're going to be able to really prove that, but you know, I would hope that they do better than what they're doing right now, because this is definitely numbing people to what's going on, you know. So and if you're oh my god, you guys, so, while we're on break here, I'm going to show you guys this here, just because it's hilarious to me that it's an actual thing. So I'm going to show you guys real fast, because why wouldn't we, right? Not that it's an endorsement or sponsorship, but I want to introduce you guys to the beauty that is Cocaine Bear. February 24th. Keep your eyes open for it. Cocaine Bear, guys. They are still on break over at the courthouse, but man, I tell you what. But Cocaine Bear is something to look forward to. If you're looking for a late Valentine's Day date, there you go. Week and a half later, you guys can both enjoy the splendor that is a bear high on cocaine and see Ray Liotta in what I think is probably his last movie. Let's go ahead and check back into the courthouse here and see what they're doing. I know they're still they're still on break, but let's see what's happening with them all the same. I know they're going to cover some stuff from earlier today, hopefully more interesting than the stuff we've been looking at. So here we go.
I didn't want to move her stuff.
This is Blanca Simpson, the Murdaugh family housekeeper. And again, court is just taking a quick break here, so I know that bear would become an addict after that.
It was just a weird feeling going through when I unlocked the front door to get in. It felt cold.
You can't see that underneath the banner. So she left dinner.
When you got inside?
When I got inside, I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't do anything. I walked through the front door and I went in the kitchen. And I was kind of, when I looked in the kitchen, I kind of just stopped in my tracks and I looked at the stove and I was kind of, I don't know what the word is. When I looked and I noticed the stove, that there was no pots.
All right, we're not getting any sound from the courtroom yet. No, we're still waiting on them to turn up the mics for whatever reason. Maybe they're not aware that the volume's down, but they usually correct these things pretty quick. So no sound just yet. There we go. And
all right, thank you.
Here we go.
Mr. Barber.
Good afternoon, Agent Wild.
Good afternoon, sir.
I don't think I'll have many questions. This won't take long at all.
Thank Lord.
We were looking at a lot of maps, and they had a lot of timestamps, and I think they're referred to as pings sometimes.
They're not pings.
What are they?
They're activations on the record. So whether they be incoming or outgoing phone calls, or those RTT activations, which are slightly different, or the other things with Paul's phone, those are like the iPhone.
Okay, I'm sorry, ping. I take it back.
Records.
But we're looking at calls, text messages. Would a text message always make one of those timestamps?
Now, so on Verizon, which all the phones in this case were, With Verizon, we're not going to get call detail record. We're not going to get location data with the text messages, just the way they're designed.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear when we said that there weren't any more calls coming into Maggie Murdaugh after 7, that there were some text messages, but wouldn't, if there were, they wouldn't show up.
Correct. They wouldn't show up in her call detail records with cell tower information.
What would it look like on these maps if a call, well, let me ask this, do calls hand off between towers while they're still going on?
They do.
And what would that look like on these maps?
So it would look the same way it looks now. So again, when the call, before the call's even set up, so if my phone was on in this room right now, my phone is constantly scanning the environment. It's trying to find the tower and sector with the strongest signal. Okay, it's very much like sitting at the airport trying to find the best Wi-Fi to connect to while you're waiting your flight. So what happens when a call hands off between towers during a call is the records look like they look. It's still going to show the initial tower and sector that the phone saw as the best tower and sector at the time the call occurred. And then after that, let's say the call is an hour long and I drive from here to Columbia, I'm going to hand off tower to tower to tower, but on Verizon, I'm not going to see that handoff in the records.
Right, and that I guess was my question, is you're just going to see that first tower. So if you're handed off like tower 1 to 2 to 3, you're not going to see on the same calls hits on towers 2 and 3 on this map.
Correct. You're only going to see the initial.
And do the coverage areas intentionally overlap to some degree to allow for handoffs?
Yes.
And we saw GPS data for Paul Murdaugh's phone.
Yes.
Did you have any GPS data for Maggie Murdaugh's phone?
I did not. There was nothing in the location database for the time period that was in question.
Do you know why that was?
It's either something Paul was running on his phone that generated it, or a lack of something that Maggie wasn't running on her phone that did not generate it. I really don't know the answer to that.
I mean, so the answer would be that you don't know.
I don't know. Yes.
And what about Alex Murdaugh's phone?
There was nothing during the time period.
So you mentioned that you've testified as an expert in, I think, over 100 cases?
Yes, sir.
And in some of those other cases, were you able to show phones moving together?
Sometimes we are, yes.
Were you able to do that in this case?
I did not do that in this case.
When you were doing the drive around to create that sort of coverage map, did you go onto the Moselle property?
I did.
Was that with the consent of Alex Murdaugh?
Yes, I believe so.
Could we pull up slide 35? Can you see the screen?
I can.
And I think the previous testimony was that this 10:06:31 call was the 911 call?
Yes.
I just want to ask about that timestamp because we heard from someone from the FBI yesterday the 911 call was actually placed at 10:06 and 18 seconds. So what would account for the 13 seconds difference between the two?
I guess it depends on the records you were looking at. There might be a slight offset between the records the other person was looking at and the records I was looking at.
And the 911 call center, of course, would have a timestamp on incoming calls.
Correct.
Right. Have you ever seen cases where there's a few seconds difference between those timestamps and this kind of records and what the 911 center might have?
Yes, sir. I mean, there's a difference between when you press the green button, and it usually takes a couple of seconds to connect on the other side.
And could we, on the Elmo, go to slide 56? And the reason I would like to do this on the Elmo is I think that the presentation was cutting off the bottom of the screen.
It was.
And this, can we see the top so we can kind of get context for what this is? Just, yeah, slide it down so that the top is visible. So this was Alex Murdaugh information, and this was on June 15, 2021, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Do you know that was Tuesday?
I don't.
We scroll so we can see the bottom. It says that activity after 2:33 p.m. indicates travel to Somerville. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any data after that? Is that the end of the data that you have regarding Alex Murdaugh?
Is that the last slide?
You have
Okay.
the slide. So this is slide 56 that we're looking at.
Yeah, there was other data after that.
And you have location data for Alex Murdaugh after June 15th?
I think so. I think
in this report?
Not in this report.
So in this report, I'm sorry, because that's what we're looking at here.
Yes, sir.
Because I understand, of course, you have cell phone records. He kept using the cell phone, obviously, after the 15th.
Yes, he did.
But for what's being presented to the jury, the last entry is, Tuesday, June 15, is the end of what you have.
Yes, it is.
And he's going to Somerville.
Yes, sir.
And finally, there last 2 or 3 slides, we don't need to show them. There was some information for some other people, a C.B. Rowe, a Marty Cook.
Yes, sir.
Why were you looking at information for them?
I was requested to look at the information for them for the night of the incident.
Were you requested to ever look at information for an Eddie Smith or a Spencer Roberts?
Eddie Smith sounds familiar, but I'm not sure about Spencer Roberts.
Did you look at information regarding Eddie Smith?
Yes.
Do you have that information with you?
I do not.
You do not have the information?
I don't have it with me, no.
Beg the court's indulgence. No further questions, Your Honor.
By the state.
Briefly, Agent Wild, you were asked by Mr. Barber whether you've been able to pinpoint 2 phones together in other cases, correct?
Yes.
Generally speaking, what kind of data are you using when you try to have been able to pinpoint 2 phones together at the same time?
I mean, first of all, the 2 phones have to have activity around the same time. So we'd have to have calls at 9 o'clock on one phone and calls at 8:58, 9 o'clock on the next phone. That's the first thing we'd have to do. Second thing is it'd have to be indication the phones are traveling together or stationary at the same place at the same time.
Okay. And after 7:50 p.m., was there any Verizon location tower information provided by Verizon?
There was not on Maggie Murdaugh's phone. There was not.
So you wouldn't be able to provide any opinion as to whether her phone was near any other phone in the world after 7:50 p.m., correct?
That's correct, because there's no data to compare it against.
Okay. The first and second.
Yes, sir.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Your next witness.
State calls Nathan Tootin.
Please, Lord, no more talk about anything that has to do with anything cell phone related.
Nathan Tootin, T-U-T-E-N.
Nathan Tootin looks like he got Benjamin Buttons. He's like a
Hey,
young
good
old
afternoon.
man.
How you doing?
An old
Good.
young man.
Doing well. Why don't you tell this jury a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school,
Give us the
Start
deets,
there.
bro.
I'm from Hampton, South Carolina.
All the
Graduated from Whiteham High School in 2018. I have a degree in criminal justice from University of South Carolina and graduated in 21.
Nathan, it's hard to pick up you on the mic, so if you would, I know it's, pull it as close as you can and just try to speak into it so we can all hear you. Okay, so I think you said you graduated high school 2018. You got a degree from where?
University of South Carolina.
And what field was it in?
Criminal justice.
Okay. And what year did you graduate USC?
21.
And what do you currently do for a living?
Law enforcement officer.
Okay, with what organization?
Walterboro Police Department.
All right. And describe your job responsibilities. What do you do as a Walterboro police officer?
I enforce the laws of the state and serve and protect.
You work in road patrol right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Nathan, growing up in this area, were you childhood friends with Paul Murdaugh?
That's correct.
When's the first time you met Paul?
Lifelong friends. Very young age.
Growing up in Hampton, knew him as a kid.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, tell us a little bit about Paul. What do you remember about him? Tell us the kind of guy he was.
Paul was the definition of a good person and a good friend. He's very loyal, salt of the earth kind of guy, and would do anything for you at any given moment, no matter the time.
What were kind of things that Paul, you all like to do together?
We like to hunt, fish, really just hang out with friends.
Was Paul the kind of friend that you kind of call a reliable friend?
Absolutely.
All right. Was he the kind of kid that would be there for you if you needed help with anything?
Absolutely.
Did you spend a lot of time together with Paul through the years?
I did, yes, sir.
Did Paul have a cell phone?
Yes, sir.
Did he like to use his cell phone?
Yes, sir.
How would you describe it?
He was on his phone all the time.
In addition to being on his phone all the time, was he the kind of guy that if you needed something or reached out to him, he was going to respond back to you?
That's correct.
Was he going to call you back if you called him if you missed the phone call?
Yes.
And would you expect him to pick up if you called him?
Yes.
All right. Did you get to know Maggie also?
I did.
All right. Tell us a little bit about her.
Maggie was probably one of the sweetest ladies I've ever met in my life. She always looked out for Paul's friends and was a second mom to me.
And having spent a lot of time with Paul, did you also spend a lot of time with Maggie?
That's correct.
And then did you also get to know Alex?
I did.
Dad? Okay. And is Alex here today?
Yes, she is.
Can you tell me where he is?
He's sitting at that table wearing the boot jacket.
And did you get to know him very well?
I did.
Through the years. Did you know the family before they moved their primary residence out to what we call Moselle? Did you know them before then?
I did.
Okay. Were you there when they moved or obtained Moselle and started using that as a residence?
I was.
All right. When Moselle was first constructed, how many entrances and exits were there?
Just one.
And which one was that?
That was the one by the cabin, or one that leads to the sheds.
Okay. And the sheds is that the dog kennels in the hangar area?
That's correct.
And the cabin I think you referred to, is there a cabin on the side at the front of that entrance?
That's correct.
Okay. And who put the mailbox in there?
I believe it was Maggie.
And tell us about that cabin. Tell us where it's situated and why you know so much about it.
My freshman year of college, Paul and I actually lived together at the cabin.
So it's like a small house, basically.
That's correct.
And where is it situated in regards to the hangar area?
A little bit closer to the highway.
How many feet or how far away?
100 yards, maybe.
And so you lived there, I think you said for the summer?
It's just a semester.
A semester?
Mm-hmm.
All right. How would you describe yours and Paul's friendship? How How often would you guys communicate a day?
Just about every day, every other day.
Phone calls
That's correct.
and texts?
Primarily phone calls.
And later in life, did Paul go to school?
He did.
Where did he go?
USC,
And that's located where?
Columbia.
And did you see him whenever he would come back into town?
I would.
Would he come back frequently
No, sir.
at the college level, at the college years?
No, sir.
When would you see him? Would you see him in the summers when school was out?
Good bit.
All right. And I think you mentioned before y'all did a lot of fishing and a lot of hunting. Are you familiar with firearms in general?
I would say so.
Did Paul have any guns that he favored? Ones that he kept on him and kept with him most of the time?
He did.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about, however you want to describe those two guns.
The two guns that were with us most of the time was a black 300 blackout and a camouflage 12 gauge Super Black Eagle 3.
And the black 300 blackout, what was that firearm used for primarily?
Anything.
Did you use it for hunting?
I did.
Okay. What would you hunt with that gun?
Anything.
Did it have the scope? I think you said there's a scope on the top or some sort of sight. How would you describe that?
As thermal scope.
Meaning you could see heat?
That's correct.
Okay. And describe the Benelli shotgun that you just mentioned also. What did it look like, and how did you know it was Paul's?
It had a very distinct digital camouflage pattern, and he had a gun strap that he's used since I've known him, and that's what stayed on that shotgun.
Do you know the differences between? So we hear Benelli Super Black Eagle models, and then I think we've heard 3 and 2 and 1. Do you know the differences between the various models?
I do.
Okay. So when you look at it, they have distinctive features on them that would tell you whether it's a 3 or a 2 or a 1?
Very subtle differences, but yes.
But you feel comfortable that you know the difference?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Sorry.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as, entered in evidence as State's Exhibit 88. Permission to approach the witness. Nathan, I'm handing you what's been marked and entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 88. You feel comfortable taking this for a second and now tell me if you know what it is?
I do.
Okay. Here you go. Be aware of the muzzle.
This is Paul's rifle.
And you know that because you've used this a bunch of times?
That's correct.
And also now show you what's entered into evidence as State's Exhibit number 4. Is this one? This is State's Exhibit 4. Do you feel comfortable taking a look at this for me for a second and let me know if you know which firearm this is?
I do. No, the safety's off.
It's in there. Thank you.
This is Paul's shotgun.
How do you know?
I've used it several times in a distinct camouflage pattern along with Paul's gun strap.
This strap in particular is Paul's?
That's correct.
How do you know this is a Model 3 Benelli Super Black Eagle?
Well, would you like me to explain?
Absolutely.
So there are a few subtle differences. One being the forearm grip. The Super Black Eagle 3 has a slight flare or increase in curve. Another difference would be the trigger magazine port has an indentation that allows you to insert shot shells easier. The Super Black Eagle 2 and previous models don't have that. Another difference would be the button that releases the bolt, which makes the weapon operable. The previous models, being the original and number 2, are circular, whereas this one is more rectangular. I mean, the easiest way to tell the difference is they're labeled 2 and 3.
Thank you. I'm going to show you now what's been entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 91.
Kid knows his stuff, man.
You feel comfortable handling this gun for a second? Let me know if you recognize what it is.
I do.
Do you recognize what this gun is?
I recognize that as Buster Murdaugh shotgun.
Okay. What model is this?
Super Black Eagle 2.
And you know it's a 2 because of the other features you just mentioned and pointed out for the jury?
That's correct.
Would you do that again? Tell us why you know that's a 2.
Like I mentioned earlier, the slight flare on the 3. This one is straighter, more narrow. Does not have the indention for the magazine port, and the button is circular.
And you said it was Buster shotgun. How do you know that?
The Mojo sticker on the barrel.
The sticker at the top of the barrel there?
That's correct.
Familiar with it. Mojo.
That's correct.
Did Alex have a gun that he favored, a shotgun?
He did.
What was one that he favored?
That was a Super Black Eagle original black shotgun.
Are you familiar? Did Paul have a 300 blackout rifle prior to the black one you just identified?
That's correct.
All right. Were you familiar with what happened to
Yeah,
that?
KJ, I'd like to
firearm,
find
the
out as
original
well.
one?
I am.
All right. Tell us the story.
It was a party, and there's a black 300 blackout and a tan 300 blackout. He had the tan one, and it got stolen from a party one night.
Speak up.
It was stolen from a party one night.
You know what year that was? Approximate year?
I'd say early 2018.
And that was the firearm that was stolen was what color again?
Tan.
Tan. All right. At what point in the Mizell property was what year, approximate year, was the second entrance created? That one with the brickwork.
I'm not sure.
It was a few years though after they'd owned the property. The family had owned the property.
That's correct.
Was it common to use either entrance by the family to leave and enter the property?
Yes and no.
All right, we'll explain.
Paul and I would use, and friends would use the entrance by the sheds more, whereas Alec and Maggie would use the main gate entrance more.
If you all, and let me ask you, what were the, before we get to my next question, what the hangar area with the kennels, are you familiar with it?
That's correct.
Could you describe to the jury just a very basic layout of that area?
It was kennels as you're riding into the driveway. The kennels would be on your left. The shed or hangar would be directly on your right. There was another shed that they had built in front of the hangar, and there was a skinning shed for animals out back to the right.
And would you spend a lot of time down at the hangar area and kennel area?
We would.
Why would y'all hang out there? Why was that the kind of the collection place?
It's just a central location where everything was located.
Tools?
Correct.
And farm equipment?
Correct.
If you all were spending time down at the kennels and someone was leaving the house, would it be common for them that someone, whether it's, Alex or Maggie, to stop by on their way out, leaving the property?
Yes, sir.
That would be what would normally happen?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to play what's been marked as, I'm going to show you what's been not marked, but entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 297. If you would, you have a little screen there. If you wouldn't mind watching that for me and listening. Thank you for the computer.
Quit, Cash. Quit. It's okay. Come here. Come here, Cash. Okay. Hey, you got burgers now. Hey, Bubba. That's a guinea. This is a chicken. Come here, Bubba. Come here, Cash. Come here, Bubba. Cash. Quit.
Did you hear voices on that video that we just played?
I did.
Whose voices did you hear?
Paul Murdaugh's, Maggie Murdaugh's, and Alex Murdaugh's.
Could you tell where they were located in that video? Did you get a sense of where that was?
Dog kennels.
Okay. The kennels down at the hangar area?
That's correct.
We heard yelled out a name called Bubba. Are you familiar with Bubba?
I am.
Who's Bubba?
That'd be Paul's dog.
And what kind of dog is he?
A yellow lab.
Is he trained? Well, was he was he a house pet or a pet?
At that time, yeah.
Was he also trained to hunt or be a hunting dog or a bird dog?
That's correct.
Did Bubba have a? Well, describe Bubba. How would you describe Bubba?
Hard-headed.
Did Bubba have a thing where he liked to chase chickens?
I'd say so, yeah.
If a chicken got out of the pen, would he chase it?
That's correct.
Have you ever been there when he caught chickens?
He would chase anything.
He'll chase. Did you ever there when he caught birds though that were coming out of that coop?
I mean, he's tried. Could I say I've seen him? No.
Were you aware then that Bubba? Were you aware that Bubba would chase those chickens?
Absolutely.
And had you been aware that he killed chickens before by getting them? Have you ever had to wrestle anything out of Bubba's mouth or try to catch him when he doesn't want to be caught?
Tried to catch him.
And if he doesn't want to be caught, what's going to happen?
Not catching him.
Did you begin working at the law firm we've heard called PMPED?
That's correct.
Or when did you start working there?
I believe it was February of 2019.
Okay, and what was your job there?
I was a runner.
Runner for the law firm in general.
That's correct.
Kind of without specifically not yet talking about the work you did for Alex, but what kind of work would you do there generally?
Be a courier for court documents to different courthouses and law offices across the state. Assist paralegals and attorneys with really whatever they needed. Just help around the office.
And you worked there from 2019, and when's the last time you worked there?
I want to say it was May of 21.
So May of 2021. Or
excuse me, 2022.
2022. So you would have continued to work there through the tragic events of June 7th, 2021?
That's correct.
So you saw the upheaval at the law firm as well. You witnessed that?
That's correct.
Nathan, I'm gonna direct your attention to the weekend leading up to June 7th. Could you tell us a little bit about the any communications you would have had with Paul leading up to June 7th? Did you all talk any leading up to it?
To the best of my memory, we spoke that Saturday. I think he called me over the weekend
Did it seem like a normal conversation?
Yes, sir.
What were y'all talking about?
He was going to Charleston, I believe. He was talking on the way.
Is that the last time you talked to Paul?
That's correct.
How were you made aware of what happened? How'd you find out?
I received a phone call from my mother the night of. Not sure how she knew, but shortly after I received a phone call from one of the law partners that told me.
And they called you because they knew you were close with Paul?
That's correct.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living with another friend of mine in Allendale County.
And did you go out there that night?
I did not.
Did you attend the funeral and wake?
I did.
Is that the last time you went to Mazzell?
Yes, sir.
After these events, how did it affect you?
It was hard. Losing a really good friend and a really good person.
After these events, I think you said already, but you continued to work at the law firm?
That's correct.
How was Alex? Was he out of the office for some time leading after this event on June 7th?
That's correct.
Did he eventually start coming back into the office?
A little bit.
Did you have an opportunity or an occasion or multiple occasions to do running for Alex?
Yes, sir.
All right. And this would be before the murder?
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about what Alex would have you do.
If I need to pick up court documents from different law firms or courthouses, drive them depositions, cash checks, some of the things.
I'm sorry, you said cash checks?
That's correct.
He had you cash checks for him?
That's correct.
All right, well, tell me, where would he send you to cash the checks?
Palmetto State Bank.
What were your instructions for that?
Cash check.
And what would you do with the money?
Take it back to his office. And
Like cash?
that's correct.
Is it in an envelope or are you just holding it?
It was in a Palmetto State envelope.
Okay. And you would take that envelope of cash and where would you bring it?
Back to his office.
Okay, and just hand it to him.
That's correct.
How many times did he have you cash checks like that?
Very frequently.
Very frequent?
That's correct.
Many times.
Many times.
Was there ever a time when you cashed that check and there was a room full of, has there ever been any time where you cashed the check, brought it back to Alex's office and there was someone in his office?
That's correct.
Multiple people, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Tell us who those folks were that you would have been there when Alex is sending you to get cash. You're coming back with the cash and there's someone sitting in his office.
There was different occasions. One particular occasion was Greg Alexander.
Who's he?
I believe he's the chief of police for the embassy.
Okay.
Corey Fleming.
Do you know Corey Fleming?
I do.
And what is he? What did he do?
He was an attorney as well.
Okay.
And Alex's best friend.
Okay. And who else?
And Chris Wilson.
And do you know who Chris Wilson is?
I do.
Who is he?
He's an attorney in Bamberg, I believe.
When did Alex stop asking you to cash checks? What was the time frame?
I believe it was a few weeks before the murders. So
a few weeks. You've been doing this a lot, and a few weeks before the murder, he doesn't ask you to cash any more checks.
That's correct.
Did you have an opportunity, or were you assigned to assist? Or let me ask you this: do you know who Jeannie Seckinger is?
I am.
And who is she, and who was she at the time to you back in 2021 range?
She was my immediate supervisor.
And were you ever, after the events of June 7th, were you assigned and tasked to assist her in her investigation of financial improprieties within the firm?
In some ways, yes.
All right.
Share the stream if you would, please, guys, as we're getting towards the end of the week here, wrapping up the.
All right, and continuing, you were assigned to assist Jeannie, and what kind of things were you doing in that capacity?
We would look through different cases. She would have me get cases from probate court, and go through and highlight clear checks, and if I found a discrepancy, bring it to her.
Did you understand the scope and what you were looking for? Did she kind of involve you in that?
Somewhat.
Did you figure out kind of shortly thereafter what you were looking for, or what the reason was?
I'd say so.
I'm going to direct your attention to July of 2021, specifically July 4th, or July 4th timeframe. You have that in your brain?
I do.
Did you drive Alex to the airport?
I did.
Tell us about that. Why did you drive him to the airport?
Well, at the time I was still a runner, and he asked me to give him a lift to the airport. So that's what I did.
Where was he going?
I believe he was going to Florida Keys with Maggie's family.
So he's going on vacation to the Keys on July 4th weekend or July 4th timeframe?
That's correct.
And did you in fact drive him to the airport?
That's correct.
Did you have a chance? Did he say anything to you on that ride to the airport?
We talked.
Did he tell you anything about the boat case?
He did.
What did he say?
He said that he would like to clear Paul's name.
And do what? And beat the boat case?
Beat the boat case.
So now with Paul gone, he's talking about he can beat the boat case.
That's correct.
This is a month after the murder?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, court's indulgence. Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It was very important, Alex, to clear Paul's name from the accusations in the boating case, wasn't it?
I don't know.
That's what he told you, right?
That's what he said, but I don't know what he was thinking.
Well, you know that he stood behind Paul all throughout the boating case, the criminal part, right?
That's correct.
And a lot of people in the Hampton community turned their backs on Paul, didn't they?
That's correct.
You didn't, did you?
No, sir.
Alex and Maggie didn't, did they?
No, sir.
Your brother didn't, did he?
No, sir.
And are you sure it was July 4th?
The week of the 4th. That's correct.
Okay. And he was going to Florida on a vacation and visiting with Maggie's parents, Maggie's sister, brother-in-law. You understood that?
Yes, sir.
Now you're talking about you went and got some cashing some checks with for Alec, and sometimes you'd come back, give him the cash, and you mentioned that Greg Alexander was in his office one time, Corey Fleming one time, Chris Wilson one time. You remember that?
That's correct.
What'd you do when you walk in? Just give the envelope to Alec?
Yes, sir.
Did you sit down and see what he did with the money?
Not at all.
Are you suggesting that he was giving Greg Alexander any of the money?
I'm not suggesting anything.
Okay. Do you know if that's what the Attorney General was trying to suggest by asking you that?
Objection, Your Honor. Sustained.
You've known Paul, you knew Paul his life for the most part, correct?
Correct.
And how old are you?
23.
And I think you described Alex and Maggie as kind of your second parents.
That's correct.
You spent a lot of time at Moselle. You hunted with Paul and Buster too, I take it.
That's correct.
And you lived there at that cabin you talked about right there on the edge of Moselle Road, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And Paul's go-to guns were a 300 Blackout and the 12 gauge Benelli that you identified here in the courtroom, right?
That's correct.
But now you knew that Paul's had originally been given a 300 Blackout for Christmas that got stolen, right?
Correct.
Did you go to the party with Paul and he had the 300 Blackout in his truck? Go in the party, come back, and it's gone?
Not exactly how it happened.
How did it happen?
Didn't realize it was missing for a few days.
Okay. And Paul would never lock his truck, would he?
No, sir.
And he would leave guns in his truck, right?
That's correct.
Did you know that 300 Blackout had been replaced?
I did not.
Okay. When did you learn that?
This trial?
During the trial.
That's correct.
But up until the trial, you never knew that it had been replaced.
No.
But you'd seen Paul use 300 Blackout you identified as his go-to gun, right?
That's correct.
And the 300 Blackout that you identified has a thermal scope, does it not?
That's correct.
And whose gun did you think got stolen? Paul's or Buster's?
I would assume Paul's.
Were you aware that the 300 Blackout replacement did not have a thermal scope?
If I didn't know about the gun, then no.
Okay. So do you know whether or not this is Buster's 300 Blackout sitting here in the courtroom?
That is the gun that I used at Moselle.
Okay. Now, when Paul would clean his truck out, he would let me back up. Paul normally keep guns in his truck?
That's correct.
300 Blackout, 12 gauge, anything else?
Sometimes some pistols, but.
And there were times when Paul would clean his truck out and then he would take the guns and leave them in the shed down there by the kennels, right?
That's correct.
And sometimes he would forget that he left them down there, right?
That's correct.
And I think you described him as being careless with leaving guns around. Is that right?
I'd say so.
Okay. And he'd even left guns in your truck, right?
Correct.
Now, Paul was a guy who liked to work with his hands outside, correct?
Correct.
And he loved the Moselle property. Is that right?
I'd say so.
And he liked to work the land with equipment and plant for game management, for duck hunting and dove hunting and things like that, right?
That's correct.
And to do that, he wasn't always on his phone, right? I mean, he liked to work with his hands. Is that fair to say?
Wouldn't say that altogether. Take several breaks while he's working with his hands.
Right. And I think you've described it. He would put his phone down and while he was doing some work, and then he'd forget where it was. He'd lose it. He'd go back and find it later.
That's correct.
That happened fairly regularly, didn't it?
I'd say so.
And you listen to the video that was played, did you hear water running in the background?
I'm not sure.
What kind of work would Paul do down there by the kennels?
What do you mean?
I mean, you know, if Bubba or the other dog had messed in their dog run, would he clean it up?
I'd say so.
Okay. And if he did that, you know, perhaps he'd put his phone down while he did that so it wouldn't get wet.
I would assume so.
Yeah. It's a reasonable thing to do, right?
I'd say so.
Okay. Now, you were close with Alex, Maggie, Paul, and Buster. That you and your brother were, right?
Yes, sir.
And you were able to observe Alex's relationship with Paul, right?
Yes, sir.
How would you describe it?
I'd say it was a very loving relationship.
Okay. And okay. And how would you describe Alex's relationship with Maggie?
I would describe it the same.
1 second, Your Honor. To your knowledge, after the boating accident, did Paul receive threats of any kind?
Correct.
What kind of threats were you aware of?
Just threats that he would say people would text him, or different social media platforms, but
right.
Didn't really go into very vivid detail or anything.
I'm sorry.
Didn't go into very vivid detail about anything. He just.
And his circle of friends got really close, tight after the boating accident. And you and your brother, he talked to you all frequently, did he not?
That's correct.
Okay. And then he would go to Charleston to visit with friends down there, correct?
That's correct.
So he didn't feel comfortable, you know, in the Hampton area where he lived because of the boating accident. Is that right?
He stayed away.
Yes, sir. That's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Nathan, you were asked about threats to Paul. Did you ever know that Maggie received any threats?
I was not aware of any, no.
I'm going to ask you, counsel asked you about a little bit about the kennel area and asked if you'd heard water. Are you familiar with how generally the kennels were cleaned? Were you there when the kennels would be cleaned?
Sometimes.
Okay. Generally speaking, describe the kennel for me. What was actually inside of one of the kennel runs?
The kennel had a doghouse, beds in the doghouse, and just kind of like a concrete pad.
And if you're going to rinse off the kennels, what would you do with the dog bed?
You would put it on top of the dog house
Okay, and why was that?
so it wouldn't get wet.
And then what would you just leave the dog? Would the family or if you were cleaning it, leave the dog bed up on the top of the kennel, or are they going to bring it down when the kennel after a certain point in time?
You wait for it to dry and then bring the bed.
If the family, if you were down there or anyone was down there at the kennel area and it was nighttime, would you turn the lights on?
Yes, sir.
Are there sufficient lights out there to make it a fairly well lit area if all the lights are on?
I'd say so.
If you're at the main house and the lights are on down at the kennels, can you see that area from the house?
Yes.
Would it be very visible to you to see that there's lights on down there?
Yes.
Would the fans, are there fans in the kennel area?
There are.
Would the fans be left on generally for the dogs?
Generally.
And again, if anyone was down there working, would the lights be turned on?
Yes, sir.
That's it. No further questions.
Anything further?
Counsel asked you a question about Paul's phone usage. I think he said Paul uses his hands and what he would do with his phone. Do you recall if Paul did have to use his phone, would he put it in any of his pockets?
If he was working outside in that capacity, the pocket he would put it in would be his back pocket.
And that was the common thing he would do almost nearly every time?
That's correct.
Nothing further. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything further? Just a moment, sir.
Your Honor, thank you.
You may step down.
I'd say it'd be great if they just said, you know what? We don't got time for any more witnesses today. It's 5
All right,
o'clock.
ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this day.
Hey.
Please, we'll have a good weekend, and we'll see you 9:30 Monday morning.
So that happened unexpectedly. All right. Well, good for us. We have that, that wraps it for the week. We did it. We made it through another week of this trial. And you guys always know the prosecution takes their time to be as thorough and painstaking as possible. This prosecution is no exception to the rule. They have the burden of responsibility to prove without a shadow of a doubt that Alex Murdaugh is in fact guilty of multiple homicide in the first degree, which is what he is being tried for currently. That being said, they do have their work cut out for him, because I do feel personally, and I know a lot of you have voiced your thoughts as well, that they really haven't got enough put together as of yet to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was undeniable truth that he did murder his family. So, where does it go from here? What's the next steps for the prosecution? They said they have a couple more days, a handful of more witnesses. They said they'd be wrapping it up by midweek next week. So between now and then, you guys, we'll see what happens. I am hoping that that cousin, what was his name? Cousin what comes in? The suicide for hire. Cousin Eddie, I think his name is. I'm thinking National Lampoon situation here. Either way, no matter what happens, you guys, Cousin Eddie, yeah. Set up notifications. Make sure you have your notifications updated when you go into notify, and it'll say that you're following. Click on following again in Facebook or wherever you're at, and then change it from highlighted to all on live feeds, posts, all that stuff. You need to make sure to do that, because it's, one of those things. Meta did a phenomenal job of botching things up for the world as it was flowing. Beyond that, share the stream if you would, please, to your groups, whatever they might be, friends, family, buy, sell, shop, local community networks, whatever they are there. And make sure to tune in with us Monday morning at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern, and 6:30 again for those West Coasters that are going to be jumping in at the early hour for what's going to be day 14, part 1 of this Alex Murdaugh murder trial. I want to thank our folks over at the courthouse that are doing their work, and Law and Crime for pulling up all the needs for us to make sure we have all the coverage that we need to give to you. You guys, this is CJ TV. I'm your host, CJ. I appreciate all your comments, concerns, and theories as well. If you would, please give me a call. When I post that number, I really want to hear from you. So give me a call with any theories you might have on any of the cases involved with the Murdaughs. They're always interesting. No matter how far-fetched, one of them might actually land. And in this situation, it's probably going to be one of the crazy ones that actually hits. So you guys know my thought. And again, keep your eye out for Cocaine Bear coming out February 28th. I'm sure it's going to be a blockbuster that will commemorate the amazing career of Ray Liotta. And I don't mean that with any kind of sarcasm. He was a great actor, but no longer with us. And I believe this is the last movie we're going to see him in, where a bear ingested copious amounts of cocaine that probably fell out of the Murdaugh plane while flying over Tennessee. Who knows? It could have happened. It could have happened, and this would be the case where we're going to see it happen. So I hope it happened. I hope that we find a caveat in this, and the cliffhanger will go to the Murdaughs somehow, like the tail number on the plane will be somehow traced back to the family. Who knows? but I feel like it should happen. And if it doesn't happen, we should make that happen. That'll be the tie. You guys make sure to be safe this weekend as well. We got the Super Bowl going on. A lot of folks are going to be out drinking. A lot of folks are going to be out partying. You guys be very careful on the roads. It's going to be cold. It's going to be icy. It's going to be full of people that are imbibed. So make sure you are on your P's and Q's, and don't put yourself in a dangerous situation, and definitely don't put anyone else in a dangerous situation. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. I look forward to seeing you all Monday morning for, like I said, day 14 of this Alex Murdaugh murder trial. You guys are phenomenal. Again, thank you for sharing the stream and for all of the support via stars, super chats, super stickers. You guys are an amazing community. You've done a phenomenal job of helping grow this platform and keeping us moving in the right direction. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you all bright and early Monday. And if anything pops up this weekend that's newsworthy, I'll jump in there. So between now and then, you guys take care.